Welcome, welcome, one and all. Welcome to the debate dissection with Mark Reed and Ember. We are taking apart a recent debate on modern day debate, always our friend in giving us content to take apart. And it is Matt Dillahunty versus Cliffe Knechtle. I presume that's the pronunciation. I never get the pronunciation of that right.
You're closer than I am. I get
Stuart
comments
Knechtle.
every time I try to say it.
Knechtle. Anyway, and this isn't the first debate they have. They've had many the debate over the years, and so I think we should get right into it. Is there anything you have to bring up, Ember, while we're here, or should we just press onwards and up?
No, I mean, there's no particular or special starting notes. Obviously, this is a recent debate, just happened last week-ish over on MDD. We both caught it while it was live, and anything special we'll mention as we get to it, I suppose.
Sure. So it is Christianity true is the proposition of the debate. So it's specifically Christianity, is Christianity true? And we'll see if Cliff's got any truth out there for us. I do prefer his son, Stuart. I do prefer Stuart, but we'll see how he deals with Matt Dillahunty on this one.
What is evidence? Evidence is facts that point to a conclusion. And the evidence is that Jesus Christ lived an amazing life, taught incredible teachings, died on a cross forgiving his enemies, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Now, is that scientific evidence? No. Scientific evidence does not tell me anything about George Washington being first president of the United States.
I'm not sure that's quite true, because he said evidence is what did he say? What was his definition of evidence? Sorry, I'm just going to go back to
my atheist conscience. My atheist friend's conscience is that good and that to be true of reality, and that is exactly what Jesus Christ talked about, fighting for other countries. There's this amazing combination of the good and the wretched. And when I look at the different philosophies of life and the different religions, Jesus Christ stands out in his piercing analysis of the human dilemma, which is a dilemma of the human heart, meaning by that the human soul, meaning by that the human mind, will, emotions, that tends to rebel against God, and at other times tends to do that which is very good. So we are a weird concoction. And I find that to be true of reality, and that is exactly what Jesus Christ talked about. Another basic reality that he talked about. James, I think I've lost you totally now.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'll just keep going. The question is, why are human beings valuable? And every human...
This is weird. Like, I want to say as evidence, it's kind of, I think it was slightly off. He sort of said it was something that points to facts, and that's not true. Evidence is a collection of facts that points to the truth. So I think his definition was slightly off.
Yeah,
but
he's trying to skew things right out of the gate.
Yeah, but he's going down to this is a question of the human heart, and it's like, why? I don't. So is like what is his idea of truth? Because he's talking to the human condition now, and I've never heard the human condition particularly bring about truth.
Yeah, because I think he's trying to make that emotional play. Like, is Christianity factual? Maybe not, but it can still be true if it's true for you. But the problem there is, obviously, Matt won't allow that nonsense. And we can all see, well, by the same token, Islam is true, and Buddhism is true, and Hinduism is true. And if they're all true, and many of them say this is the only true one, everything else is fake, then you get caught in that mutual contradiction net.
Right, they can't all be true. Like, it's just impossible. It can't be true that a god created the world and Shiva created the world, from Hinduism. That can't, both of those can't be true. They're logically exclusive. So, it sounds like he's trying to say, hey, they're useful, or they're good for us, kind of thing, which isn't the debate. He's in the wrong debate. You're in the wrong debate, Cliff.
I mean, shock.
Atheist friend of mine is convinced that human beings are valuable. But why is the question? And Jesus Christ points out that we all are valuable because we're all created in the image and likeness of God for a purpose. We're all loved by God, and God considers us so valuable that he wants to give us eternal life.
Well, why wouldn't we all be valuable? Like, why would that be the case? I don't get it. Like, why can't we just they're valuable to us? Like, I might have a favorite pillow that's valuable to me, but just worthless to everybody else. You know, like your idea of value, just because you value something, it must be true, is a nonsensical connection.
And to build onto that, this idea that he's putting forward, that God values everyone and wants to give them eternal life, well, why can't he do it? Like, he's all powerful, right? Why has he got to put barriers and roadblocks in the way? And you know, he's only fucking himself over in that case.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Jesus Christ said is the way to eternal life. It's through faith and trust in him. Another reality that I experience every day is an innate drive to do that which is good. Is good real, or is it just a myth? No, I'm convinced, due to the exercise of my conscience and due to the exercise of my atheist conscience, my atheist friend's conscience is, that good is real and evil is real. And the only way that can be real is if there is some type of mind prior to the human mind that creates and defines the values of...
That's a big non sequitur.
That's a complete non sequitur. Like, is good and evil real? Like, objectively real? Because, I mean, you would say the law is. I mean, I'm not sure, like, what kind of... Because the law's real. I mean, try breaking the law and then saying, hey, the law's not real, it doesn't apply to me. Like, just because something... So, sort of in philosophy, you refer to them as concretes and abstracts kind of thing. Like, the law's just an abstraction. We just made it up. But it does have significant consequences that are very real if you break it. So it's kind of, it's really weird the way that he's using terms, because he's sort of saying, well, if morality isn't real, it can't exist. Or if morality is not objective, it can't exist. And it's like, why?
Yeah, this whole concept of a mind behind and before everything.
Right.
It gets used a lot. But I have yet to hear anybody even attempt to bridge that gap. I'm sure somebody's tried. Probably William Lane Craig took a stab at it at one point. It didn't work, so he just does. That's not one of the arguments he brings up. But it just doesn't follow for so many people, myself included. How do you get to there's a thing, therefore there must have been a mind? Right. And even if we grant that, it still doesn't get you to your specific God.
Correct. And it, like, you see the only people that use this kind of argument. So I'm very weirded out as to why Cliffe's actually using it, is pre-suppers that go, well, I'm just going to assume that I'm going to presuppose that a God is the moral foundation for everything, and then just move onwards from there. And it's like, wait, how did you get that? No, don't look behind the curtain. That's you don't look there. You know, like, come on now. So yeah, I'm bewildered as to why Cliffe's doing this, because there's no way this will get past Matt. Like, he's not gonna miss this. There's no way.
Good and evil. So Jesus Christ answers that basic human reality in a powerful way. And then I go to funerals. I perform funerals as a pastor, and the question is there life after death? Matt, I'm very grateful that you had successful bypass surgery. That's a tremendous affirmation of life that the doctors were able to use their skill to heal your heart, and I'm so excited for you. I've been praying for you. I can promise you, we all have a desire to live life. And Jesus Christ promises eternal life to all.
It's just because we have a desire to live life doesn't mean there's life after death. He's basically using the thing of, and this is so disappointing with Cliffe, because he's basically saying, well, do you want to live after you die? Is that something you want?
Yeah.
Well, then
here's a cookie, but you can only get the cookie if you praise my friend's name.
Right. It's kind of this. But you know, it's worse than that, because he's not holding a cookie at all. He's saying that there's a cookie somewhere, you know, like that you'll get, and the best cookie ever. But the whole thing is, it doesn't matter what I want. That's such a non sequitur. Like, I could want there to be a garden and 50 elephants for me after I die. It doesn't mean that it's true. He's gone completely from what is true to what do you want to be true, and those are two totally different things.
All who trust in him. Now, why is he true? Because the evidence points to him. What is evidence? Evidence is facts that point to a conclusion, and the evidence.
Oh no, you got it right. Facts that point to a conclusion.
That Jesus Christ lived an amazing life, taught incredible teachings, died on a cross forgiving his enemies, and 3 days later he rose from the dead. Now, is that scientific evidence? No. Scientific evidence does not tell me anything about George Washington being first president of the United States. Scientific evidence tells us nothing about whether Matt's wife really loves him or whether my wife really loves me. There are different types of evidence. There's scientific evidence, but there's also historical evidence, and there's also relational evidence. And you and I, as thinking human beings, must be open to philosophy and logic and reason. You and I, as human beings, have rational minds. And part of reason includes science. It also includes logic, mathematics, but it also includes the relational. And I can promise you my relationship with my wife and my sons and my grand.
Yeah, he's kind of, yeah. I mean, yeah, scientific evidence is just evidence that's been collected scientifically. That's all. But it's you know, you kind of, yeah, I don't know about this one.
Well, he throws out that historical evidence thing, and that's AIG terminology. They're the only ones who talk about that. Yeah. That's sort of a red flag about the direction he may be going. Also, this whole chummy business with, oh, Matt's been my friend for, you know, X number of years, and then he talks about Matt's wife. I don't know if that's an intent to rile him up, or if he just has no idea, but Matt's been divorced for a while now, and he was aware of the heart surgery. The reason Matt and Arden are together is because when Matt had to do his heart surgery, Arden was there for him, you know, and that means a lot, you know, so that's why they've been together all this time, why they got together, really. And the fact that Cliffe knows about the heart surgery and not the divorce and current long-term relationship, it just, either he's out of touch or he's trying to piss Matt off, and I'm not sure which it is.
Right. I didn't even know that. Don't get me wrong, I do like Matt's debates, but I don't really follow his personal life at all. I don't, you know, really keep up to date. No,
that's absolutely fair. I mean, you know, Matt doesn't like the fact that Matt has fanboys, but he's a very public figure, and you know, right. Yeah. It just, shit comes up.
Yeah, and if he is doing that, then shame on you, sir, because that's just terrible kind of thing. That's not cool, you know. And I don't even think, you know, sort of bringing up his heart surgery is cool. It's an appeal to emotion kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, you had a, you know, slight brush with death. Don't you wish you would live after you died? Well, it's got nothing to do with the debate, Cliff. Stop it. He's a preacher at heart, is Cliff. Like, really, let's face it. He's not a debater, he's a preacher.
Grandchildren, my daughters-in-law, is far more important than any scientific postulate. Jesus Christ addresses this powerfully when he points out, the purpose of life is to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It has the ring of truth. It has the ring of reality.
A lot of things have the ring of truth that aren't true. Like, there are things that are sort of non-intuitive things. They sound like they're true. They're just not true.
Yeah.
What's a good example? Sorry, go ahead.
Random factoids often come off that way. Like, you know, people spew out some information like, you know, did you know that the Titanic had 1776 bolts in it? You know, it's just weird. It's the kind of thing people repeat without ever checking because it sounds like it might be true, and it's, you know, cool to have more knowledge than somebody else. It's not quite ring of truth territory, but it's off the top of my head.
I think we even have a word for it. Wasn't it that somebody coined truthity kind of thing? Like things that are sort of not true, but they sound really true. Like you sort of say, hey, a congressman was arrested for, you know, having, or that thing of, oh, Hillary's got a, you know, child but dungeon basement. To some people, that has such a ring of truth because, you know, let's face it, Hillary was a pretty awful person. So, you know, that just rings true. And it's like, that doesn't make it, that's not how we evaluate the truth. A lot of people appeal to intuition for what is true. And it's like, well, intuition can be really, really bad. Intuition's useful, but it's not a good way to get to the truth.
Yeah, and that word you were looking for is truthiness. It was coined by Stephen Colbert.
Truthiness.
Yeah,
yep, absolutely. Truthiness.
The George W. Bush stuff, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Iraq helped with 9/11. Not true at all, but it sounds like it might be true, so it has a high truthiness value.
It rings of truth, right? Because I mean, let's face it, there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but Saddam Hussein was horrible tyrannical despot. You know, like it has that ring of truth to it. So why are you so angry, Cliff? Look, yeah, so his evaluation of the truth is terrible. Like, that's just terrible. Does it sound true? Well, it's true. No, Cliff, no, bad, no.
So, truth is that which is real. Evidence or facts that point to what is real. Can I prove anything in life? No, I can't prove anything in life. To prove means to show that it cannot be another way. So no, I can't prove anything beyond the shadow of a doubt. But as a thinking human being...
I love how I just tacked on beyond a shadow of a doubt there. You know, like...
Well, we gotta lower the bar a little.
Yeah. Can I prove anything? No. Well, it's more saying, oh, I can't prove anything, and then sort of lifting that bar afterwards to say, hey, you can't prove anything, so, you know, and then say, oh, but beyond shadow of a doubt. So, yeah, we don't have absolute truth, Cliff. That doesn't mean we can't prove in the colloquial sense. God, I've still got trauma over, you know, science doesn't prove anything, so we can't know anything. It's come on. Like, that's basically what he's doing. You can't have absolute knowledge, so we can't be certain of anything. So this God claim with literally no evidence behind it is just as good as a claim, you know, that the sky is blue with a lot of evidence. Like, they're on equal footing because we can't prove anything. Get out of here, Cliff.
Yeah.
Nobody's falling for it.
Like Asimov used to say, it's this weird idea, particularly among Americans, though you can find it everywhere in the world, that everybody's opinion is equally valid. So, you know, my ignorance is just as valid as your facts.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
I'm not a cynic. I don't use the fact that I can't prove anything to say, well, therefore I can't know anything. No, I can know things scientifically. I can know things mathematically. I can know things logically and rationally. I can know things scientifically. Shortly after World War II, General Dwight David Eisenhower asked for journalists from around the world to come to Nazi Germany. Why? To record Dachau, Auschwitz, Buchenwald. Why? Because Eisenhower wanted to make it very...
I hate the way he does this. Goes, why? And then proceeds to give he's a straight preacher. That's what he is. He's a preacher at heart. Like, why? You'll need something in your life. Why? Dude, just tell us. Like, you don't have to, like, put on this big fanfare.
You know, at least he understands it's for the audience. He knows by now he's never going to convince Matt.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Why are you so angry, Cliff?
very clear. Dachau, Auschwitz, and Buchenwald, the horrible prison camps of the Nazi Germans, was not propaganda. It was the truth. There's a difference between propaganda and truth. And the fascinating thing about faith in Christ is, if he rose from the dead, he's the truth. If he didn't rise...
Yeah, so, yeah, Godwin's Law already. We're getting into the Nazis. Like,
Godwin's Law adjacent, yes.
Yeah, so Nazis, therefore Christianity true.
Which is a really weird, out of all the, totalitarian horror shows that took place in the mid-20th century, the Nazis are the one group who were expressly Christian. So that's a weird choice for Cliffe to make.
Overwhelmingly Catholic, yes. It's a very weird choice. He's better off going with like Stalin or Mao or something like that, I don't know why. I don't. Yeah.
Rise from the dead, he's a liar. In other words, Christ gives us a way to verify him or falsify him. That's tremendously appealing to me as a thinking.
What is that way, Cliff? Because you said if he's true, then if he's real, then it's the truth. If he's not, then he's false.
Yeah, if he rose, it's true.
Yeah, if he rose,
so
it's true.
That's a falsification criteria. But how do we investigate that, Cliff?
Right. Like, how do we falsify that, Cliff? Because here's the thing. You would have to ask, it's not just how do we make sure it happened. You would have to say, how do we falsify that happened? Like, how do we go about proving it doesn't happen? And no Christian ever will give you a criteria that you can actually do to falsify it. Oh, we've got the first super chat from Pinworm. Pinworm for $5. Thank you, Pinworm. Saturday night's all right for debating. Saturday night. I hope I got that right. Saturday
I think you're supposed to sing it like Elton John.
Oh. How do I sing it like Elton John?
I don't know. I can't sing like Elton John, but I know that's an Elton John song.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Saturday night's all right for debating. Saturday. I can't do the letters
Oh,
though.
thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds familiar now you're saying it. I do like Elton John. He's done some awesome songs like Candle in the Wind and stuff like that. It's just wonderful. But yeah,
Circle of
I'm
Life?
not familiar with that. Saturdays. Is that okay? Elton. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Human being who is interested in truth. Now, if I say that I believe something is true, but I find that I can't live it out, then I better go back to my initial assumptions about what I believe.
When you can't live it out, I don't know. Like, if something's true, it's just true. You don't have to live it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the hell he means by that.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's like he's sort of equating truth with like a personal standard of living kind of thing.
Because gravity is true, so you have to live the gravity?
I don't know. If I can't live it out, I better, I mean, there's certain things that are true that I don't want to live out. Like, it is true that I have the capacity to, I have the ability to rob somebody, right? That is true. But it's not like I want to live it out. I will actively stop people. What are you talking about, Cliff? It bewilders me so much, like so much.
And question them and ask, what is a more accurate view of reality? Jesus Christ presents a profoundly accurate view of reality.
How?
It's an interesting claim.
Like how?
I'm willing to entertain it, but I want something to back it up. Like, what is it?
Right.
As Hitchens used to put it, what is one thing that is more true or more accessible or more real for a theist than for an atheist?
Yeah.
Like, is the sidewalk more solid? Is the ice cream more tasty? What is the differentiator here?
And does Jesus rising from the dead give us any more knowledge about is there some technology that I'm unaware of that is based upon Jesus rising from the dead? Is there some kind of knowledge secret knowledge that you have because Jesus rose from? Does it give you some sort of insight into reality? And if it does, demonstrate that reality is true, but then you're back to square one. You're assuming it's true. Without actually going to the difficulty of proving that it's true. This is weird.
Carrie Ann in the chat has experienced bodily resurrection, so we should be worshiping Carrie Ann.
Yep. I'm game.
I mean, at least we know she's real.
Right,
That's a good start.
Carrie Ann. Yeah, that does a lot for my belief in somebody when I can talk to them. Yeah.
Read the Gospels, examine them for yourself, and you'll see that the evidence is he's not a quack, he's not a liar, he's not a lunatic, he's not a legend, he's the truth. So that's
the old C.S. Lewis quote. Once you read the Gospels for yourself, you have to come to one of three conclusions: that Jesus was either a liar, a lunatic, or is actually the Lord. Of course, he leaves out that fourth possibility, which is the whole thing's made up, but we won't talk about that today.
Well, he included the legend. That's what he included, but without any kind of justification for doing so. But he's not saying, hey, he's either one of these things. He's saying he's not a liar. He's not whatever. And
it's cool to say, but how do we know?
Right, and I think this is really weird, and this is the weird thing that Cliff does. He just preaches. So I think if you were going to debate this topic, sort of coming from a Christian perspective, you'd want to sort of refer to your extra biblical sources of Jesus rising from the dead, because that is the crux of the matter, right? Did Jesus resurrect from the dead, and is he the Lord essentially? So most people I know that would debate this, Christians that I know would debate this, would sort of go, well, there was Josephus and Tacitus, and start to work on the evidence kind of in that direction. We have these Gospels, and at least make the case that Jesus was a person, and then probably sort of angle towards, well, it's more parsimonious kind of thing. That's how it's steelman their position. But he's just skipped right to, well, it is true.
Yeah, and that's, it's the worst kind of begging the question. It's begging the question of the actual debate. Like, Is Christianity true? Well, of course it's true. Okay, I rest my case. You know?
And then a whole bunch of non sequiturs to why it's true. Like, does it make you feel good to think about your wife? Well, then Christianity is true. How does one thing follow the other, Cliff? Like that. Ugh.
This is why I'm convinced that faith in Christ is very wise. Provable? No. Evidence pointing to it? Absolutely yes.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Yeah, you want to share that evidence you got there, buddy? You got any of that evidence? What evidence? Because you haven't given any. You've just said, "Hey, you feel good. You know you love your wife. You don't need evidence for that." Okay, well, I think you've got evidence of that. I think if you didn't have evidence that you loved your wife, you probably wouldn't be with her. Yeah, that's really weird.
For that opening, Cliff. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. And folks, I've got to call attention to this. We very rarely mention it. But we have those memberships.
I guess for the prayers as well. I'm sure there were plenty of people praying for my heart.
Sorry?
James with we rarely mention this. Channel memberships, yada. I'm like, James, you mention it every damn show.
No, he doesn't. That's the thing. Like, I've watched tons of debates on here, and he never mentions it. Like, they're probably jumping up and down at him. Yeah, he mentions.
Could swear, maybe it's only because I've only seen like a very recent few. I feel like they just got around to turning on memberships once they crossed 100K.
No, they've been on for a while. They've definitely been on for a while. I think he's just sort of hasn't mentioned them in a while. And he doesn't have like custom emotes and things like that. Well, no, he does have custom emotes. That's a lie.
I know he's got a couple. Maybe he just started to put work into them. I don't know. But while we're on the topic, Mark Reed also has memberships available with custom emojis. You've seen some of them in the chat this evening.
Absolutely. And there is some benefits for like higher level members. At the second level, you get conversationalists, you get access to streams. I'm doing gaming streams for people at the moment who are in the higher tiers. And at the third level, you get social access, and you get to game with me. There you go. That's something. Well, I feel really weird.
Yeah, you're currently murdering dinosaurs with some of our other friends.
Yes.
Aren't you?
Yeah. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So that's my gaming channel that I've just started. So if you do like dinosaurs and people getting killed, because I'm playing Ark Survival Evolved on it. It's dinosaurs and lots of fun with some of my friends. But thank you, Amber. I really appreciate that. It always feels weird to plug yourself. It really does.
Anyway,
I should be more like. I should be more like Hovind, buy my DVDs at every opportunity, like every
just put on the Hovind
opportunity.
voice, it'll be fine.
Right. Buy my DVDs. The government's trying to shut me down.
Yeah.
Friggin' Hovind.
And all of them will give credit to God for saving me from dying a year and a half ago, but I'll credit the doctors and science because that's what actually did it. So the subject of tonight's debate is supposed to be, is Christianity true? And for me, when we look at whether or not something's true, we need to, or any debate topic, we should probably define terms. And I think I heard Cliff say, truth is that which comports with reality in some version or another. So I think we're on the same page with regard to whether or not something should count as true. It's just seems to be, how are we going to define the key elements of Christianity? And how are we going to verify that those things are actually true? And if the criteria that we use to verify Christianity, when applied to other things, bears those out as well, and they are in conflict, then our methodology is horribly flawed. Because if the foundation that we use to say, the guiding or the principal foundations of Christianity are true, if those are claimed to be true on the same criteria that would also prove Islam or Scientology, then we don't have any methodology at all, because we...
Right, what he's talking about is being intellectually consistent. And Azho64, you are a champ. 1 month super chat is good times. By the way, I'm the art god. Well, at least I can talk to you, Azho. That does a lot for your credibility when I can talk to the god in question. So, yeah, absolutely. But what he's talking about is intellectual consistency. It's saying that if I'm going to have a standard of evidence for this thing, that standard has got to be applied across the board. And you always see where the standard of evidence for, say, a Christian will have the standard of evidence way down here for their religion and massively high for every other religion out there. Yeah.
I blame Low Bar Bill.
Low Bar Bill? Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I set the
If you
bar
can't-
on the ground. If there's one chance in a million.
if you can't like hurdle that belief bar, just drop it to your ankles. Don't even bother. Like, you know.
Yeah. Don't hurt
come on.
yourself tripping over it. It's not a high jump. You don't hit. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's William Lane Craig for the, I'm saying this very, very sort of tongue in cheek, for the win kind of thing. So yeah, that is not oh god, I can't believe you brought that up. That triggers me so much. It's just that lack of intellectual consistency, that applying the same requirements for and it always gets me I'm over at Donny's a lot because I do debates over there and I have a lot of fun doing so. My last debate was against McQueen, and that was so much fun. He really, like, McQueen, I don't even know. Like, he just, his level for evidence is like, well, my daughter said, oh, your daughter's a speech pathologist. She says
I just love the cue cards. He just runs through the cue cards. I'm like, props to the dude for like pre-planning his case, but it's wow.
Okay, yeah, and meanwhile I've got sort of an entire presentation on PowerPoint kind of thing. It's just wow. Yeah, McQueen, I don't think too badly of him. I think he's okay. It's just he's so slow. Yeah, but yeah. So I'm over there, but the level of evidence they give for stuff like evolution is so high, right? You've got to show the animal changing from one to another like a Pokemon, and their evidence for God is so low. Like they don't. It's incredible. It really is incredible.
We've now confirmed competing ideas using the same methods. So if, for example, to go to fantasy for a moment, Narnia, I think we would all agree, is not a real place. And yet the concept of Narnia exists in minds and it exists in writing. And in addition to the books about Narnia, there is a map of Narnia. And one key principle in logic when we're discussing fallacies is not to confuse the map for the place. It is very tempting to look at and say, oh, we seem to know so much about this, or there's so much information here that this must be real. That's not the exact pathway to the fallacy, but it's what I think of when I start talking about the concept versus the thing. Now, within Christianity, how would we go about understanding what the foundational ideas are? I would tend to go to what the Bible says and what has been traditionally identified within Orthodox Christianity, going to Paul and Romans and talking about if Christ be not raised, our faith is in vain. The resurrection of Jesus Christ must be the cornerstone of Christianity, and other factors like there is a God, that Jesus is either God incarnate or a representative of God, however you might end up looking at it. But those elements are the bedrock. How would we demonstrate those? Well, we only know that they exist because of a book. And we can't use the book on its own. The book on its own is insufficient to verify the claims, just as the Quran on its own would be insufficient to verify the claims of Islam, and Dianetics on its own is insufficient to verify the claims of Scientology. So that method is insufficient. So we need something beyond that. Now, if we don't have empirical evidence for a physical claim, the broadest...
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like the Christians think that the Bible's enough to prove itself. The Islamists think that the Quran is enough to prove itself, and it's inconsistent. It just is.
Yeah, so. we need more.
Mm-hmm. Position we can have is we don't know whether or not that claim is true. So if someone tells me, hey, this individual rose from the dead, and we have nothing but the claim and a bunch of people who believed it, and no physical evidence of that to verify it, I can't believe the claim. If you were to say, is this statement true, and insert a statement, you could get a yes answer for statements that tie to things that are not demonstrable. For example, there may be a diamond the size of my fist, 10 feet below the soil at a particular location on Mars. That may be true, but if someone were to come in and say it is true in a debate, they would need to be able to demonstrate it. Anything that you can't demonstrate is merely identical from a logical perspective to something that isn't true. From our perspective, it's not true until it's demonstrated or demonstrable. And so if that item were to exist on Mars, it may be in fact true that the item exists, but it would be wrong for us to say it is true, because to make a claim that something is true carries with it this notion that you can demonstrate it in some way. Now, what way do we have to demonstrate anything supernatural? As far as I can tell, we don't. There are plenty of claims that something is supernatural, and when you drill down, what you're getting is I've experienced something, or it has been reported to me that something occurred for which I am not aware of a natural explanation. Therefore, the explanation, or the most plausible explanation, is one that is supernatural. That is a fallacious line of reasoning that is predicated on the notion that you would need to know everything in order to know that there was no natural explanation just because you don't have one now. And so I don't know of any other way I don't know of any way anybody has ever demonstrated that the supernatural is real, exists, is true, can in fact interact with anything. And yet those are the foundations behind Christianity and other claims, because God exists supposedly outside of space-time. God's ontology is supernatural, beyond nature. How do we demonstrate that?
Well, I mean, that's not necessary to show the cornerstone of Christianity. Like, you know, so I'd agree that that Jesus rising from the dead is the cornerstone. So there presumably would be a non-supernatural way to demonstrate that happens, because that is a physical thing in sort of the universe, right? That if somebody dies and they're completely dead, obviously we can't investigate that because it happened, you know, back 2,000 years ago, and, you know, we don't have the means to sort of check on it. But I'm not sure that you have to get to the supernatural to show that the cornerstone of Christianity is actually true.
I think you may be touching on an important insight here, because from a Christian perspective, the assumption is Jesus did rise from the dead. That's
right.
a given. We're saying that's what needs to be demonstrated, but there's a subset within Christianity who says that is a fact, and only the supernatural can explain it. And then they turn it back around on us skeptics and say, how else could you explain a person rising from the dead? It has to be supernatural. There's a disconnect. They're not seeing that's not the question we want an answer to. It's not how do you rise from the dead? It's did he rise from the dead? And how do we show that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, and Matt's got a point that once you've established that Jesus rose from the dead, you would have to then go on to demonstrate that it was a god powers, you know, instead of, say, aliens. Necromancy. Or right, exactly. So but I think at a base level, yeah. I mean, let's just start with the rising from the dead first. Prove that first, and then we'll go on to the supernatural explanation for it.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't have any way to demonstrate that any such thing exists, let alone a specific thing exists. And yet somehow there are people who seem to know, or think they know, a great deal about the specifics of the supernatural and God. For example, and I promise I'm not just doing this for fun, and I'm not trying to saddle Cliff with somebody else's views on God. But this week, because it amused me and it confused me, I'm going to share a tweet from someone who may in fact be watching. The tweet reads, "My Christian beliefs point to the 5 generals running hell: Baal, impurity; Lilith, female lesbianism; Asmodeus, sodomy; Baphomet, child sacrifice, worship, abortion, killing innocent offspring; and Leviathan, female homosexuality." Now, this individual, despite the fact that this is not expressly covered in the Bible in any way, believes that they understand that hell is real, that hell has an organizational structure, that organizational structure has 5 generals, which are somehow responsible for various sins. And this individual seems to think that female lesbianism and perhaps female homosexuality are 2 different sins. And I don't know what female lesbianism is versus male lesbianism, but the 5...
That amused the hell out of me, how 2 of the 5 most horrible things are both female homosexuality. Like, the world must be in pretty goddamn good shape if, LGBT people, one specific flavor of LGBT people are 2 of the 5 most horrible things in the world.
Right. I think they've got a problem with lesbians, whoever believes this. But I don't know how this is relevant. Like, to sort of criticize Matt a little too. Because these people have a belief about this doesn't, really. I think he should be sort of countering Cliff's position, not some random person who probably has some mental health issues. I really shouldn't say that because I'm not in a position to judge, or analyze somebody. But why is he bringing up some random email that he got? I don't understand.
I think, and it may just be he's not presenting it super well, but
is he trying to sort of point out that without good beliefs you can believe in some crazy stuff, like without sort of a logical foundation.
Along those lines,
Yeah, okay.
because there's no rails to keep that cart on the track, so people are going to go off in wild directions. Because when you just kind of make up what the truth is, then people are just going to make up whatever they want.
Yeah, so it'd be a real good plot twist if this turned out to be an email from Cliff. That would be hilarious. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that would be hilarious. Well, I mean, it is what I want, so obviously it's the truth, according to Cliff.
Ones that they go through tell us much more about this individual's psyche and what they think than anything about a real hell. And yet there are countless people sitting in churches, once again, not saddling Cliff with this. What we need to do is figure out, how is it that this person thinks they know the specifics of hell and hell's structure and sin, and what makes them right or wrong compared to Cliff's model? Does Cliff think that these are the 5 genitals of hell and what they are? And if not, how does this become a part of Christianity for a person? Because while Cliff and I disagree on Christianity, I also disagree with the individual who made that tweet about the makeup of hell. And I would have disagreed with that person even when I was still a Bible-believing Christian. And I would think that many of my debate opponents would also disagree with this person. I remember a time when I stood in front of 4 Christian apologists just before a debate, having a discussion about what the Bible has to say about slavery. Not only could they not agree on what it says, they couldn't agree on what it meant. And so my position was, you guys get together and tell me what the actual position is, and then we'll dig into it after that. And I never heard back from them. So what specific, empirically verifiable, non-mundane facts can we verify with regard to Jesus? Now, I'm not a mythicist. I'm not going to say Jesus never existed. But the fact is, there is...
Do you take a mythicist position, Ember?
I honestly, I don't really. I just don't care.
Yeah,
I talked.
Fair.
I talked to GE about that last week. Godless Engineer was on the Atheist Live show, and he's kind of semi-famously a mythicist, and I'm like, but to me, it just doesn't matter if Jesus lived, Jesus died. That's not controversial. So whether he lived or died doesn't really matter to me. There's not a lot of point in fighting over it.
Yeah, well, I know that Oz, I'm not sure if you're aware of Oz from The Flavor. He's a mythicist as well, and sort of very sort of stringent on, be a mythicist because that cuts off, sort of Christians' ability to argue for any risen Christ, because if he was a myth, and it's like, well, you're doing kind of the same thing they are. You're sort of saying, because I don't want it to be true, then it isn't true.
Well, I do see some value in it, because even if Jesus, okay, let me rephrase. If you can't demonstrate that it isn't a myth, if you can't even reach that minimum standard of evidence, then how are you going to make these outrageous claims about everything else? If you can't dispel the mythicist position, you don't even have to believe in mythicism. You just assert it, and if it can't be dispelled, then you can't go any further,
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Super chat from Solom. $5. Love that you and Emma are doing this date. Well, thank you. I'm loving it too. I love doing debate reviews, especially with you, Ember. It's a good time. It is a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I've noticed Iron Charity. I've noticed. Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Isn't scientific evidence to confirm his existence or any of the elements of his life, right up to the most important aspect, which is crucifixion, or his resurrection, which is, I think, something that Cliff just noted, that he can't provide scientific evidence. Can't provide scientific evidence on this. And Cliff would like to use examples like love. We can't scientifically prove love. Well, we can, in fact, investigate the human brain and the feelings of love scientifically. But where we are barred from investigating things like love is in the mind itself. I don't have access to your mind and your thoughts. But a resurrection is not a mind-encapsulated thing. A resurrection is an occurrence in space-time of someone being dead and then raised from the dead. To pretend that this somehow puts it in the same fuzzy, unable-to-touch criteria as love is a misrepresentation of the facts. What we need is a way to demonstrate the truth of the foundational claims of Christianity, and I have yet to hear one.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, he's right. Sort of Cliff's trying to say, hey, you'll never be able to find out, so, why not just believe it? Yeah, it's kind of, he's really trying to put it in the camp of, well, you don't know and you'll never know kind of thing. Well, yeah, but there should be some evidence for it kind of thing. If the Bible is true, then there was earthquakes at the time and hundreds of saints got out of their graves and marched around Jerusalem. there should be more evidence than just the disciples, being utterly convinced kind of thing. You'd think the Romans would be convinced as well, but they weren't.
Yeah, I mean that should have definitely made the case for everybody in town. Like, okay, Jerusalem isn't Rome, but it was still the capital of a Roman province,
Right.
That opening as well, Matt. We are going to jump into the open conversation, folks. A couple of quick things. If you happen to have a question for the Q&A session.
No, not a couple of quick.
Verified is not
of love scientifically. But where we are barred.
Otherwise, super chats are read first. You can put your question in that way as well. And also want to mention, floor is all yours.
How do you want to run this, guys?
I'll let you start however you want.
Already? If someone makes a statement, truth is only that which can be scientifically verified, they're committing intellectual suicide. They're self-contradictory. Because the statement, truth is only that which can be scientifically verified, is not scientifically provable. Instead, it's philosophy. It is a philosophy.
I didn't say that or anything even remotely like it. There are some things I fully acknowledge. You don't have access to what's going on in my mind or anybody else's mind. And so it may in fact be true that I'm thinking of a white elephant and you have no way of knowing that. So that's a particular category of a truth. Are you suggesting that the resurrection of Jesus, instead of being an actual event in space-time for which there would and could be physical evidence, is roughly equivalent to a thought?
In my opening comments, Matt, I stated very clearly that there are different forms of evidence, different forms of knowledge: scientific, historical, mathematical, logical, personal, relational.
Okay, so what evidence is Jesus being resurrected? Like, what evidence should we expect? We should expect historical evidence. We should expect physical evidence. We should expect all of this.
Yeah, and if he wants to get into even supernatural evidence, if you want to go there, because the same claim of him resurrecting and being seen by people also includes the claim that believers should have special supernatural powers. So demonstrate the supernatural powers. That may or may not confirm the Jesus part, but at least it gives us A, something supernatural to look at for once, and B, a starting point for belief. Like, okay, this part checks out. Maybe the rest is at least plausible.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I referred to your love for your wife and her love for you. You cannot prove she loves you. She cannot prove that you love her.
Well, but we've got evidence for that. This is what really annoys me when theists go, "Oh, well, you just have faith that your wife loves you," and it's like, no. I have years and years of evidence strongly suggesting that she loves me. She makes me coffees. She cares for me when I'm sick. She cares for me when I'm upset. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence for that. And not just sort of, personal evidence. It's physical evidence as well. Like, come on. It's ridiculous to say that you don't have evidence that your wife loves you. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very similar to Tracy Harris's old argument. Like, I have this pen. I have no evidence the pen will work, but it always has in the past. That's a start, and I can test it right now to see if it still does.
And it might not.
Yeah.
And then you update your sort of, what you know about reality with how you test it. Like, then you say, hey, this pen will not work in the future. That's how we do things. But your thing is sort of, well, if you can't test it and you can't go and look at, just assume that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that?
And yet you know that the overwhelming evidence is that she really does love you, and I think you know the evidence is that you love her. That is certainly true between my wife and me.
I don't see how that's an answer to the question.
Scientific statement. It has nothing.
He's still saying wife, isn't he? He's still sort of... And
Matt is very deliberately boundarying off that area. He's like, that's not relevant. Yeah. He's not even saying let's not talk about it, because he doesn't want to show that it might potentially be a button. Because I don't think it is a button for Matt. He's also mentioned that he's still good friends with his ex. They just they weren't right together.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it might just be that Cliff's... I'm trying to be generous. Maybe it's just Cliff's old and he equates partner to wife because old. I don't know. Maybe he's just a traditionalist like that. I have no idea.
Nothing to do with science. It has to do with the trustworthiness of an individual based on evidence of trustworthiness.
Is there
Yeah, but like, yes, it's got nothing to do with science. I don't scientifically like evaluate whether my wife, I don't put it up for peer review. I got you, but it's not like it's non-physical evidence. It's not like you have no idea, so I'll just believe it in this vacuum kind of thing. No, I'm confident because there is physical, demonstrable evidence. Like if Ember goes, prove your wife loves you or demonstrate that your wife loves you, I can say, hey, there's this instance when I was in hospital, she came and visited me. And I can prove that, through hospital intakes or whatever. If I had to, for some reason, if Ember demanded I prove, like who's demanding this stuff? Just Christians, that's all. But I could show you the a gift that she's bought me. You can start to demonstrate these things, and just because that's not scientific doesn't mean that you get a pass on any evidence for Jesus whatsoever. That's not the case.
The resurrection of an individual, more in the category of a physical event that could and should have empirical evidence, or more in the category of someone loves someone.
I cannot empirically prove to you that George Washington was the first president of the United States. I have to historically prove that to you. Similarly, I cannot prove to you scientifically.
Empirically.
Yeah, like we can, though. There's there's records, there's portraits, there's any kind of evidence you could want. We can go visit the estate on what was it, Mount Vernon. Yeah, we could go visit the estate. We could theoretically go to his grave and exhume him. I mean, that wouldn't prove he was president, but it would at least prove he existed, and roughly when.
And I think he's sort of smuggling in proof as well, because we're not asking for proof as in 100% absolute confidence. What we're asking for is just a demonstration. So sort of evidence that would be convincing kind of thing. So I think he's also upping it to, if it's not overwhelming 100% absolute sort of evidence, like proof, then it's not worth anything. And that's not how we do that. I don't think Matt will let him get away with this either.
Typically, that Jesus rose from the dead, that's an historical question. So the question then becomes, for me as a thinking human being, what is the historical evidence? Not what's the scientific evidence,
sure,
not what's the philosophical evidence. What is the historical evidence that the dead Christ rose from the dead? That is the question, Matt.
So, no, the question is there...
Well, what is the historical evidence that Jesus rose from the dead? The Bible, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Their holy book. That's all. There is no other evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. There's maybe Josephus, but Josephus, some of his writings were changed by the Christian Church. We know this to be a fact.
Yeah, and on top of that, Josephus, to my knowledge, I don't read ancient Hebrew, but to my knowledge, Josephus never says Jesus rose from the dead. He says there's this cult of heretic Jews running around that says this fella named Jesus rose from the dead.
No, I think Josephus did say that there was a miracle where someone rose from the dead. I think it was Tacitus you're thinking of, who was the other source that they quote. And he never said that Jesus rose from the dead. He said that there is a bunch of people that claim that this man rose from the dead, kind of thing. So yeah, but it's interesting because I think with what Matt's doing, he's actually not helping Cliffe, but he's angling him in the way that Cliffe should be, like present the evidence. And Cliffe is more sort of saying, Jesus rose from the dead. There's evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. Well, the thing is, what is it? Don't just stop there. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't just stop with saying, oh, well, there's evidence my wife loves me.
Great.
Right. What is it?
Yeah. Christianity
what
is true
is it?
Because Jesus rose from the dead. Okay, right. That's one step, but now we still don't believe you, though. So you have to demonstrate, if that is what you're presenting to back up your assertion, now that you've made a claim, you have to back up that claim too.
Yeah.
Sufficient reason to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. We can present there is empirical evidence of George Washington, and yes, it is historic as well.
Empirical evidence. Did you ever see him, smell him, taste him, touch him?
Do you think empirical evidence requires?
He could
What are you
exhume in
talking
him, see
about,
him,
Cliff?
smell him, taste him, touch him.
I could taste him. Just
I
give him a
don't.
big old lick.
I don't wanna, but we could.
If I could, yeah, well, yes, and empirical evidence is records as well. It's like just because, so empirical evidence, like just because, like you would say there's empirical evidence that somebody committed a crime, kind of thing. There could be circumstantial evidence, there could be other kinds of evidence, but you don't have to see them for it to be empirical. I don't know why he thinks this. It's very weird. It's very weird.
Requires a person now to see, smell, taste, or touch a thing.
Yes, empiricism is an emphasis on sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch.
Yeah, you see, the problem is what you're doing there is you would, if that were the model, eliminate everything everywhere, because everything takes place in the past. You don't have any present. All you would have is your own direct experience. And then as soon as you try to corroborate it with somebody else, you're now getting secondhand information, and all of it is in the past. There's a difference between saying something happened in the past and we have claims and reports and physical evidence. See, when you talk about something like George Washington, it is within the time frame, not of my direct experience or yours or anybody else's, but to where we have a robust chain of evidence from a number of different competing sources to say that these things happened. None of them are extraordinary. None of them are supernatural. None of them are outlandish. And this is how we can have a good understanding that while George Washington was the first president of the United States, he probably did tell a lie, and the cherry tree story probably didn't happen.
And the skipping the stone across the Potomac, and I mean, and this is, it's actually a really, really great example from the skeptic side of things, because
yes,
people, apologists love to say, oh, well, the Jesus story spread really, really far, really, really fast, and legends don't happen that quickly, except they do. These George Washington legends were being written down during Thomas Jefferson's presidency, like less than one generation after the dude died,
And I loved one of the Penn and Teller shows they had. Like, they looked at how fast the thing spread about Elvis. Like, there are multiple people claiming to have Elvis's personal burger recipe, his favorite burger recipe kind of thing. And they're all different, like vastly different kind of thing. So, and he only lived, 50 years ago kind of thing. And the mythology that spread about this one individual. Now, for that one, you could make the case, hey, we have current media, TV, et cetera. But like just the rapidness of these legends concerning one individual is incredible. Like, it's really incredible.
Extra biblical evidence that Jesus really lived, died, and rose from the dead. It's incredible. The early church fathers, Clement, Bishop of Rome, Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, Justin Martyr, the first apologist,
None of those are contemporaries.
None of them. They didn't see Jesus rise from the dead.
Yeah, I mean, even Paul didn't. He was
didn't.
A Johnny come lately.
Well, once I said he never met Jesus in the flesh, right? And somebody was like, "Oh, he did," and it's just like, no. In the what do you think in the flesh means? He never even saw Jesus. He saw a light, and that's all. That's all he recorded: a light and a voice. He never saw a Jesus. He may have heard a Jesus, maybe, but
smelled him,
tasted him, touched him. Yeah. Yeah.
He touched my heart.
Oh, if you're gonna taste Jesus.
Oh,
they all knew the contemporaries. They talked with the contemporaries.
They did not know the contemporaries.
Absolutely, they did. Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, and Clement, Bishop of Rome, knew the contemporaries of Christ.
Clement, the Bishop of Rome, did he? I don't think he did.
I have no idea about that particular individual. I didn't realize there was a Bishop of Rome until after Constantine made the religion official.
Well, I mean, that was Clement of Rome. He was the first pope, wasn't he?
I don't know. I actually don't know that much about Catholic history. I thought Peter was the first pope, according to the way that, like, the book of popes that counts where, Ratzinger was supposed to be the final pope prophetically or whatever. I just don't know. Because I've never really had a reason to care.
But I mean, they never witnessed this at all. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look into this. But I mean, I thought that Clement was born in 33 or something like that. Let's have a look. Hang on, Clement of Rome. Was papacy began in he was born in 35 AD, which was, I mean, to say that he was contemporary is not true, because Jesus would have been dead before that. So there's no possible. Anyway, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't know about that there, Chief. I don't know.
Pagan knew some of those people as well. So did Thallus. So did Celsus. So did Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger. These were Roman historians who did not believe in Christ, but who at least had the intellectual honesty to say, yes, the historical evidence is that Jesus really lived and supposedly rose from the dead.
I don't believe that's what they said. I believe the recording that people believed it.
Yeah, most historians recorded that people believed that Jesus rose from the dead. They didn't actually record that they did. That's really, really misleading by Cliffe. That's very misleading.
3 AD.
I believe the reporting that people believed that. They're not.
Around 73 AD, in which he talks about Jesus Christ as an historical person. He was a Syrian philosopher. I'm sorry, Matt. The evidence is Jesus was a real historical person. Now, I find it interesting that you agree with me and say, yes, he was a real historical person. He just didn't rise from the dead. Well, why would you do that, Matt? Because the only way you know that
Because there's absolutely nothing extraordinary. Because
like, he really is just not letting Matt get a word in edgewise. Why are you doing that, Matt? Let me answer for you.
Yeah. Well,
what are you doing, Cliff?
It reminds me of that Jim Carrey movie, one of the ones where he couldn't lie. I know he's done it a couple of times.
Liar, yeah.
Yeah, where the judge says, what's the basis of your objection? And he says, because it's catastrophic to my case.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You're going to let me answer the question? Because there's absolutely nothing extraordinary about the notion that there was an itinerant Jewish rabbi or a collection of them or stories about a person. There's something incredibly extraordinary about someone rising from the dead. Those two claims are not remotely in the same category and are not remotely establishable by the same sort of evidence. And certainly not second or third hand evidence, hearsay, decades later, just because they may have known someone who knew someone.
Thank you so much for your honesty, Matt.
What? He's got a good point.
Yeah, he's saying that like it's a gotcha or something, but
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I mean, yeah, and that's a good point. I think Nocturnal Lux has a good point. They believes that Muhammad real, but that he didn't split the moon in two. Yeah, so Cliff knows that he can believe that someone was a real person and not that they did supernatural things. That's
So I'm always honest. Why do you act like you're surprised?
This has nothing to do with history.
Where have I ever been dishonest?
Supernatural does not exist. Therefore, I can accept Jesus historically, but I cannot accept his resurrection.
No, sir. Now who's not being dishonest? Not only did I not say, not only...
I should have brought popcorn.
Yeah, it just breaks down at this point because, Cliff's sort of saying, oh, but if you accept Jesus, you've got to accept he resurrected. Why, Cliff? Why? That's... That Jesus was a person and Jesus resurrected are two totally separate claims.
Yeah, I mean, for fuck's sake, I've got mundane claims that my own children don't believe. Like, I grew up on a farm, so I built barns and fences and things, and I tell my kids about building barns and fences and things, and they're like, yeah, I can't see you doing that. I just don't believe the story. And it's a completely mundane thing. No supernatural activity. Yeah. They know I exist. They still don't believe my claims,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not only have I never said that the supernatural...
Hold on, I think what we might have...
and moderation steps in. Probably required, actually. Probably required.
Yeah.
About being honest, am I going to get to talk or what?
You get to talk whenever you want to.
There might have...
You get to talk wherever you want to.
Yeah, preferably at the same time. Because, the audience can totally handle the squirrel voices.
Yeah. So it's really weird because I've had sort of you interrupt too much as well as you should just talk whenever you need to talk. I'm not like, and I think my latest one against Kyle, who was an absolute nightmare. was just sort of, oh, well, you should just say whatever you want when you want. Yeah, but I start talking and you immediately, like, I can't get a word out edgewise. Like, it's just, why are you there in that point? It's pointless being there if you're just going to talk at the same time. Like you say, nobody can hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I prefer a greater degree of structure to a debate. Having a period of open dialogue is fine, but having just opening statements and then just directly into headbutting, it's not super helpful towards making any kind of case at all. But when it is a thing that's unavoidable, because the debate venue, if you will, just wants to do it that way, I kind of like what you do, where when somebody tries to talk over you, you just switch to, I'm sorry, please let me finish, and nothing goes any further until they let you freaking finish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Sometimes you can just sort of raise your voice and keep going through it. It you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it's not.
I think hold on one second. What happens sometimes is when the connection's not great, which I think tonight, Cliff, not to pick on you, but sometimes when the connection's not great, it'll be delayed a little bit. So I think that's maybe what's happening. So I do just want to be sure.
Oh yeah, it's the delay. Yeah, James. Sure, mate. Sure.
Little diplomacy on James's part.
Well, yeah, but come on now. It's because Cliff's being really, really like doesn't want Matt to talk.
Sure that we could hear from each of you. And
Matt, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Never have I said the supernatural does not exist, not in this debate nor anywhere else. And it's dishonest of you to suggest that I have. What I have pointed out, as I have tonight, is that I don't know of any way to confirm the supernatural. I'm not saying Jesus did not rise from the dead. I'm not saying I know Jesus did not rise from the dead because the supernatural is real. I'm saying you cannot demonstrate, as far as I can tell, that Jesus rose from the dead. And the claim that someone rose from the dead, whether it was by supernatural means or natural means, is far more extraordinary than that there was an itinerant Jewish rabbi. Those two claims cannot be established on the same standards of evidence. Why would you ever think that the existence of a person and the resurrection of a person could be established merely on someone's word?
Keep going.
That was a question.
You have any more?
Yeah. So yeah, Cliff, sometimes when people ask questions, they're asking questions. They're not like saying it and then answering for them like you're doing. Just a little tip, mate.
Yeah. Pro tip there. Yeah.
Yeah, pro tip. Because I know that he asks questions and then proceeds to answer for the other people. Not everybody does that, mate. It's freaking Cliff.
I have lots of them. Are you going to answer that one?
Sure. When I study history, I can't have different ways of determining what is historical or not. I've got to be consistent. Otherwise, I'm not intellectually consistent. So I have to have tests that I use to determine whether a document is historically reliable or not. And the Quran is very reliable historically. The New Testament is very reliable historically. So I read them as history. And I take them seriously, both the Quran and the New Testament.
It's a weird thing to say, too.
The fact that the New Testament has...
What do you mean?
Because if the Quran is very reliable historically, first of all, I have to question Cliff's standard of evidence, because the Quran makes several assertions that really make me question its historical accuracy. Right. But if he thinks that it is believable and accurate, then maybe he should be a Muslim.
Well, I think he's talking about sort of the way the Quran says that the Old Testament and New Testament are real, really happened kind of thing. I think he's using it as a supporting document, which it isn't. I mean, it came so far after the events of the apparent events of the New Testament that it could never be a supporting document. But it does acknowledge that sort of so Jesus is a prophet to Muslims, basically. He's just not the Messiah and not Son of God or anything like that. He's just another prophet. So I think he's talking about that. But you're right. You're absolutely right, Ember. If he thinks that's accurate, then why wouldn't you believe the supernatural claims of the Quran, like splitting the moon in half, or having these devils being, stars being shot at devils and stuff? Why is it that historical evidence isn't enough for those supernatural claims, but it is for your Bible? So he's not being intellectually consistent.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Tremendous internal consistency, is archaeologically verifiable, is supported by an amazing number of Greek manuscripts. I am convinced that the New Testament is historically reliable, but so is the Quran. The Quran's historically reliable. There really was a dude named Muhammad who lived from about 570 to 632. And historically, that's a fact.
That he is.
Yeah. But was his supernatural claims true? So you're not addressing the question.
Yeah.
sent to heaven, and was the moon split in two?
I don't have the faintest idea. I don't think so.
And yet, you're talking about how the
There
Quran
we
is
are.
historically accurate and the Bible
Yeah. 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 Matt's on point. Absolutely on point.
historically accurate, and because you think that the Bible is historically accurate, that's good enough to justify a resurrection. But when it comes to the Quran, you don't seem to know whether or not it's enough to justify the moon splitting to two or Muhammad ascending to heaven. Why is that?
Because there's so many internal contradictions in the Quran that I cannot accept it as totally reliable. When I read the Gospels, there's a tremendous internal
Wait, it's historically accurate, but not internally reliable. Why?
Like,
How do those two things?
Yeah, I have questions. Like,
Yeah,
what methodology gets you to that position?
Right. I think if I was in this position, I would say, is the Quran reliable on the events it describes? Or is it not reliable on the events it describes? And if he says, oh, well, you know, there was a Muhammad stuff. No, all of it. Because if some things are not true in it, then it is not reliable. Right? If all of the things about Muhammad raiding caravans and, you know, setting up trade, if that's all true, it's great. If the supernatural claims are not true, then it's not reliable, right?
Yeah.
It has to be overwhelmingly sort of, you know, describe events as they happen to be a reliable historical document.
Yeah, because like if you're just going to pick out little bits and pieces, well, like Peter Pan confirms the events of Treasure Island, right? Because
Right.
Long John Silver is mentioned in both, and London is a real city, so Peter Pan must be true, right?
I think I'm converting to Tinkerbellism in a second, mate.
Hell yeah.
You've got me. I
consistency, internal harmony that is mind-boggling.
What about consistency with the facts of
Jesus
reality?
Christ really did die on a cross. He was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. His disciples dispersed in disillusionment. They were totally blown out of the water by his death. They were not expecting to see him again. But 3 days later, he first appears to some grief-torn women. And then over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him at different times.
How do you know that?
Well, books say so.
The book say so.
Yeah. How else are you supposed to know that?
A book says a thing. Yeah.
In different places, risen from the dead. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15 that Christ appeared risen from the dead to over 500 people.
Where are their stories? Where are their stories?
And you can go out and talk to these people, Paul is saying. Some of them are dead, but some of them are alive.
I can't talk to them, and we have no records of anyone ever talking to them or any of them ever getting a story from them. If God has...
Yeah, you can't claim eyewitnesses when they're anonymous. You can't do that. You can't say, hey, 500 people saw it. Who are they? Does it matter? Yeah, it kind of does, because you're claiming they were eyewitnesses.
Yeah,
it kind of does matter.
It's McCarthyism. You know, I have here a list of names, but when we checked the papers, they were all blank. So...
Yep.
Has this an incredibly important message for humanity and comes down and presents himself in human form and sacrifices himself to himself and wants to preserve this narrative. Why didn't God make sure that the Bible includes eyewitness accounts from those individuals?
We do have eyewitness accounts. Matthew was an eyewitness.
The book of Matthew was not written by Matthew.
Yeah, there's a problem there, Cliff. Who was the book of Matthew written by?
Matthew, nor was it written by an eyewitness. But I was specifically referring. But I was specifically referring to the 500.
No, baloney. Matthew wrote Matthew.
No, he didn't.
Prove that, but there's evidence supporting that. You just go to Papias. You go to the early church fathers.
And most scholars think it's highly unlikely that Matthew wrote Matthew.
I mean, maybe it's not all four Gospels, and I know it's not in every translation, but there's a number of translations that even have a little caveat at the beginning of the chapter, like, this is the Gospel of Matthew, footnote, it's not actually by an eyewitness, and it's not actually by Matthew. We're calling it by this name just for reference purposes.
No, what it does say, it's like, traditionally this book has been ascribed to Matthew. That's what it says. So what it's basically saying is, by tradition, we say this was written by Matthew. We don't know who wrote it. We have no idea. But because it has been church tradition for so long, that's who they've ascribed. Because nowhere in these documents does it say, hey, my name is Matthew and I am writing this.
Yeah, and in
fact,
shoot, it's been too long since I read the Gospels, but there's at least one of them where the character that the book is named for doesn't even enter the story until, you know, a good chunk of the way in. Like, how could this be written by that person?
We can sort of say that Peter wrote that. Like we know that, and of course Paul, we know what he wrote, but he'd never even met Jesus in the flesh. So I don't know why he would be an eyewitness to anything. So really, we've got sort of one eyewitness account that we can identify who it is. Blessed be he. If you're going to arc up, mate, we might have to show you the door. I really don't want to do that. Just talk to people.
And they wrote about Matthew writing Matthew, Mark writing Mark, Luke writing Luke, and John writing John. It's very clear.
So here, I have my Bible here. If I go to the book of Matthew on the cover sheet, what's it going to say? The very first line.
Why don't you read it for me?
Sure. Although the first gospel is anonymous,
Yeah, I that kind of holding stuff up to the camera, expecting people to read it. People can never read text that small. On the camera.
No. I mean, it's showmanship, but yeah, you have to read it. Although it's also fascinating to me that we've reached a point in this debate where like a quarter of the way through ish, and we're already literally reading out of the Bible.
Yeah.
the early church fathers were unanimous in holding that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles, was its author. So the early church fathers say that it's Matthew.
Yep. The early church fathers are unanimous that it's Matthew. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got there's no evidence for that apart from that's who they traditionally have ascribed it to. That's all. That's all.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
But the gospel itself, there we go. The gospel itself is anonymous. Among New Testament scholars in Bible colleges, do they hold that Matthew, the apostle, wrote the book of Matthew?
Who is a more reliable source of information about who wrote a book?
That is not an answer to his question.
Indeed.
That is not an answer to his question. So he just asked you in Bible scholar circles, people that have studied this extensively, who do they ascribe to the book of Matthew to? And he's like, what's more reliable? That's not an answer to the question, Cliff.
A person who lived 50 to 100 years after the writing, or a person who lived 2,000 years after the writing?
In this case, the person who lived 2,000 years after the writing, because the individual 50 to 100 years later, 100 to 200 years later, doesn't have information to the full expanse of Christendom of what we've discovered about the writings in order to compare them. Just like the early historians who were not contemporaries, but were potentially talking to contemporaries, were writing about what they heard. They don't have the investigative ability to do it. They don't have the understanding of analyzing writing. Nothing I'm saying here is remotely controversial among New Testament scholars. But
yes,
he's right. Like among New Testament scholars, they just say traditionally they've been assigned to these people, but we don't know if they wrote them. That's it. That's overwhelmingly consensus among scholarship. It just is.
Yeah.
Sorry. We can't verify that these people actually wrote these documents. I'm really sorry, but that's just the reality of the situation. If you want to say, hey, we know for sure, then demonstrate it. Demonstrate, where we know, where this book has in it, who wrote it. How do you know this? Because just saying, hey, the early church fathers, said this is not enough. It's just not enough.
Yeah.
It's very controversial.
No, it's controversial for people like you, not for New Testament scholars.
Study Daniel Wallace down in New Orleans.
You can cite one or two if you want to, but if you go to earlychristianwritings.com, if you
Writings of John Lennox, Professor Emeritus in Mathematics at Oxford University.
Sure.
Read about the first.
A professor of mathematics? Why would they have any say on where Gospels are coming from?
Well, Lennox, he's been a debate adjacent person. Like he debated Hitchens one time. That's actually one of our possibilities for next week. Is somebody Hitchens was supposed to face off against, called in sick, and Lennox happened to be in town for a different function. So the organizers were like, hey, do you want to fill in? So Lennox versus Hitchens happened. And
wow, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's clearly not his specialty, but he's happy to argue even against Hitchens.
It's funny you say that, Fenton. He does do street preaching, and it's kind of an angry version of street preaching. It's
Yeah. There's he tries to play off as he's being like super patient with people, but he's I don't know. Maybe he's just grumpy after 40 years of doing this, but he's like, why are people not getting it yet? Or I don't know, but he comes off as grumpy to me.
Yeah, I'll just address the chat really quickly. Look, blessed be he. We don't mind talking, no preaching, please. Like, so if you're going to sort of, tell people what they think and why they should believe and stuff without actually having a conversation, then that's just preaching. That isn't talking to people. We're interested in conversations, not just somebody preaching at us. So if you're here to preach, go elsewhere. If you're here to have a conversation, you're more than welcome. But yeah, we don't allow preaching, because that isn't a conversation. That is an interaction with people. It shows no respect for the other people's opinion, and we want to respect other people's opinions. So yeah,
and definitely have, remember, you're human too. Have the intellectual humility to consider the possibility that you also could be mistaken.
Sure.
The first woman president of MIT.
Okay.
Susan Hawkworth. She's a follower of Christ. She's a brilliant.
Even if
well, it's not really relevant how brilliant they are. Like the first family, and that's great that they're somebody's being the president of MIT as a woman. Sure, absolutely fantastic. But they might be an engineer or something. Why are we considering their opinion when it comes to consensus scholarship? Like, I wouldn't sort of look to you or to Ember or to anybody else like for opinions on networking stuff. Like, it's just, that's outside of your field, like it just is. But then again, I wouldn't expect like sort of, somebody in particle physics to take my opinion about particle physics. It just isn't something that we do. Like, wow.
Yeah, so for you to minimize Christians as being a bunch of narrow-minded fundamentalists who can't study, that's really, really
sir,
I don't believe Matt made that case.
No, I don't think Matt made that case either. Look, no one's shutting you up. I've just outlined exactly what I said. Sort of not preaching at people, but feel free to have conversations with people. I don't know how else simply I can put it. So you figure it out on your own. If he starts preaching, somebody time him out. But yeah, he didn't make that assertion at all. Why are you so angry, Cliff?
No, sir, I did not. That's a blatant lie. I did not care. If you're just going to try and trash everything I say, because I'm pointing out what New Testament scholars say and that you don't agree with them, and if you're going to try and shut up.
Shut up. Hold on one second.
It's getting real nasty because, why are you so angry, Cliff? He's not allowing him time to respond. He's just talking over the top of him, which is just, come on, dude, seriously.
Bad form. And it shows a weak position.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you can't let your opponent talk, if you've got to interrupt him every time he says something, then your position is terrible. Just terrible.
1 second.
If you're going to try and characterize that as me painting Christians as credulous rubes, that is dishonest and not true. I have fought against that repeatedly, and you of all people should know that.
Why did you quote the Twitter message that you got? Why did you quote that, Maddie?
Oh, he was angry about the Twitter message.
The plot thickens.
Right. So it's that. What was the Twitter message? Was that the one of the person that believed in the devils and stuff? Of
the 5 demons of hell who were gay, lesbian, female, lesbian, gay people.
Right. I kind of get Cliff's point. Like if he's debating somebody, he should address it. But I get that's why Matt was doing it. He's saying, hey, if we can't demonstrate, I think he could have been clearer that hey, I know that. Yeah, no, I get it. Because he did go on to say, hey, I wouldn't have agreed with that when I was a Christian, and I'm sure Cliff doesn't agree with it. So I feel like he's just taking it personally because he wants something to hold against Matt kind of thing.
Or he may have just completely misunderstood it, and he's like, oh, you were poisoning the well right from your opening.
That's true. I mean, he hasn't really been listening to anything Matt's been saying because he's got so wrong every single time.
Addy, you're such an open-minded, thinking human being. Why did you quote that very, very questionable Twitter?
Because you want me to answer it? You're going to ask me 4 times. Because that happened this week. It is someone making claims about Christianity. It is someone who participates in this chat. And I specifically said that you may not agree with it. But what you have to acknowledge is that Christianity at the individual level is made up of a bunch of different claims with that you guys don't all agree on. That has nothing to do with who's credulous, who's a buffoon, who's confused. I don't know. I don't have no.
Christians disagree on a lot of things. So what on earth does that have to do with Jesus Christ? Nothing. Muslims disagree.
Why are you so angry, Cliff?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that has nothing to do with whether Jesus Christ was true or not. However, it goes to show that there's so little evidence that even the faithful can't agree on what the hell any of it means.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has nothing to do with Muhammad. The Shiites and Sunnis. Tells you nothing about Muhammad. Sure, there are disagreements among Christians. Sure, there are disagreements among Muslims. Sure, there are disagreements among atheists. Tells you nothing about truth and reality. Tells you that there are people who disagree. So what? What's your point?
The point is, the fact that people disagree about foundational things within Christianity mean that we need to get to a definition of what is true and what isn't true. Because two different Christians will tell you two different things and say that they're true. And they will disagree on those things. If we're going to say Christianity is true, why are those things different? I didn't bring this to, and I repeatedly pointed it out. First of all, I find it ridiculous and amusing, and I figured that you would very easily say, no, I don't buy into the notion that there's 5 generals of hell and 2 of them are responsible for lesbian sex. But what criteria are you going to use to determine the truth of what you call Christianity that would exclude what she thinks it is?
That Twitter that you used was a sad commentary.
So the question was, what are you going to use to exclude that from Christianity? And he's just sort of giving it's a sad commentary on
yeah, he's going to elaborate because he's an emotionally driven thinker, so he's going to elaborate on why it pissed him off rather than deal with the intellectual side of the question.
Mm-hmm. That's not an argument. That's not an argument. That's just a claim. That's just a claim. Yeah. So he's just sort of doing an appeal to emotion, absolutely. And like what's interesting about this is that Matt's answering all of his questions, clarifying, trying to get it, sort of make his position clear. And Cliff's doing none of that. He's just ignoring every single thing he's asked, just keeps ranting onwards. Because preachers don't have to answer questions.
Even though Cliff's entire thing is Ask Cliff. That's what his channel is.
Right.
His show is called Give Me an Answer.
Right. But preachers don't have to give answers. They just tell you what the truth is, kind of thing. They impart on you what it is. And that is Cliff's whole shtick.
Yeah.
That's his whole
Here's
thing.
what to think. Never mind why. Just believe this and go with it.
Right. So I always pay attention to people that are answering questions, or at least trying to answer questions sort of honestly, like Matt's doing, as opposed to people like Cliff, who's just sort of in response to a question, they'll ask you a question. Like, I want you to explain this away. Hello, Kata. So good to see you.
On the stuff that you like to dabble in, Matt, that's scary. That is really scary. You know very well that there are not 5 generals in hell. You've read the Bible. So what on earth? Why would you stoop to that, Matt, and try and use that as a point? I mean, it's ridiculous.
So now you're saying that this tweet is about something that I dabble in. I had nothing to do with this.
You read it. You
Yes.
report in our debate.
You read it. It's your fault. How dare you read things?
Yeah. Well, you're kind of guilty of that one too yourself. Until the recent troubles on Reddit, you also would Reddit things.
That's true. That's true. But hey, Cliff, listen to it. So you're implicitly condemned as well. I don't know what his point is, because Matt read it aloud and you listened to it. How dare you, Cliff? How dare you? I don't even know what he's
all good here. Christians should go la 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 when information they don't like is being spread.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I get why he was doing it, kind of thing, but it's so weird. Thank you so much, James W. Counter Apologetics, who you can find over on the Amy Newman show. Fantastic show. I really wish I could be over there more. A $1.49 super chat. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. With a unicorn. With a unicorn.
You're using it. It's embarrassing, Matt. Totally embarrassing.
It doesn't embarrass me. The reason you're embarrassed is because I just asked you for what criteria would exclude that, and you have none. Because you trust the reliability of the
Bible. In the Bible does it say there are 5 generals in hell?
Well, he's making the point. Yeah, I get what you're saying. He's making the point that you can get those. Oh, James with another super sticker. This time a hot dog in buns. I think that's slightly suggestive, James, but I'll wear it. $1.49 from James W. Counter Apologetics. Again on the Amy Newman show. Fantastic show. Highly recommend. highly recommend.
Random midnight rantings and skepticism and all kinds of good stuff.
Yep. Half of the atheist night managers down here. Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I always try to pop by whenever I've got the time and I'm up.
Yes,
when it randomly happens. It's always fun.
I've been really busy. Like I'm usually on there. I used to be on there a lot more. I think I'm sort of, James, you are such a gorgeous man, but. Like, stop. Super sticker from James $1.49. He's trying to train me for reading out super chats and stuff, like, so I don't miss them.
Oh, I see.
He's training me up.
I'm awful at reading the side chat. I try, but I'm the worst. But super chats and stuff, they pile up over in that starred category, so I can always come back to them later.
Yeah, and a black cat, and Amy Newman's will be on tomorrow. I'm just going to look at my calendar, and which I can probably make that. So I might keep that aside because that is a good time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it.
That could be really cool for me too, because I've got a Book of Mormon over on Aaron's, and then immediately after, around 8:30, Aaron's coming over to my channel for the Atheist Lives. But I've been trying to keep those down to around an hour and a half, so they're really watchable. Which means I should hopefully be done by the time Amy gets around to going on. So we'll see how that goes.
And a super chat from Sinister Porpoise, $2. 3 hours being asked to explain Taoism in 2 cents. $2. First of all, so if you don't know the background of that, last time the Sinister Porpoise was on, they were asked by a certain person over and over and over what Taoism was, to explain it, to go into it in incredible detail, and it was a time. It definitely was a time. I'm so sorry. I am interviewing Sunflower coming up, Sinister Porpoise, so you might be interested in that one, because I will sort of have some questions for our little sunflowery man. But that's going to be
should be fun to watch too.
Oh, that's going to be fascinating for me. Dr. Flower, that's right. Dr. Dino with $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Dino. How dare you read? Mark, reading is for sinners. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing more sinful than a read.
It's true. And Dr. Dino also has a channel, which we both frequently pop in on, often to take apart creationists, specifically YEC creationists, because they're the most fun. But it's also a good time. I can't think of the address off the top of my head. Oh, somebody drop a link for Dr. Dino.
Give me a sec. Actually, I probably should wrench that dino, to be honest with you.
Yeah, make Dino do it himself.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, wait, he has been wrenched. Why am I... Okay, Dr. Dino, you're already wrenched. And a $5 super sticker from Ian Davenport with Keep It Up. Thank you so much, Ian. Ian's a big fan of Amy's as well. That's where I met Ian. He's an absolute champ. My Australian atheist friends, big love out to you all. So good to see you, Ian. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. That is awesome, and I really appreciate it. Wrench the dino. Absolutely, Kata. Wrench that dino. That's the only way to go. Wrench that dino. Back to the debate. But thank you, everybody, so much. I so much appreciate it. I cannot explain how much I appreciate it. It's very it's lovely of you guys, really. But back to
hell. It doesn't say there's not, does it?
What? You know, it talks about hell.
It talks about hell, but it doesn't say that there aren't any demons in hell, Cliff. And if somebody interprets, sort of puts a whole load of stuff in, then you can come up with that completely. So
I'm Googling like what the holy books say about how many generals of hell there are, and unfortunately the results I'm getting are mixed together. I'm getting Bible, Quran,
okay. Well, he mentioned
and Dante, which technically is fan fiction.
Yes, Dante definitely is fan fiction. But Lilith comes from the Torah, I believe. It comes from the Jewish sort of thing. So, um, yeah, absolutely. So that is sort of, I mean, that's not really fan fiction. That's original source material, as far as I'm concerned, for the Old Testament. So,
First edition.
Right, first edition Dungeons and Dragons. So Lilith is actually one that sort of, maybe that's more sort of balanced than others. Another super chat, crispy AC filters for $2. Thank you so much. No Vegemite sticker. No, but I can make a sort of thing. What are they called?
The emojis?
Emoji.
Yeah,
Emoji
you should have enough members to be able to add more emojis by now.
I hope so. Is that how it works? I think. Yeah. Okay. I can probably
you start with 4 slots, and then I can't. I have a list because YouTube won't tell you the list. You have to dig for it. But
okay.
Once you have 2 members, you can add another one. You get another at 5 members. You get another at 7 members, maybe. And then it goes 10, 15, 20, and so forth. But I think you've got a couple of slots open.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't think Vegemite's that great. It's got to be Jesus Mite or something. Like I think that's got to be done. I think that's got to be done.
Have Nara make you a freaking buff Jesus.
Buff Jesus. so Jesus Mite, so good you'll resurrect. I don't know. Lilith
to die for.
Yeah. Sorry, thanks, James. Yeah, you're probably right. Lilith is Talmud. Yeah, you're probably right, mate. Absolutely. Virgin Mite. Okay, Rainrick. Okay, getting a bit personal now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
You don't have. What is your methodology? What is your methodology that excludes that?
Very simple.
Yeah. So he's asking what excludes a Christian from believing that. Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all, I think you could come up with better examples. I don't think there's a great example, because you can't point to a better example would be support for slavery or something like that, right? Because that's outlined in the Bible. Or what would be another good one? Killing off people that have displeased God. Because that is outlined in the Bible clearly, right?
The whole book of Exodus. Curse your mother and father, death. Be late for loan payment, death.
So what I would probably do is point to say the Westboro Baptist Church, right? And say, hey, they have got this thing of we will kill, in the name of God kind of thing. And that is what the Bible says to do. So I'd probably use something like that.
Whenever I read any book, to interpret accurately means to read in context and to respect literary style. And by reading in context and by respecting literary style, there's no way that you can come away from reading the New Testament saying the New Testament teaches there are 5 generals in hell.
But you could come away thinking that gay people deserve to die.
Yeah, you could, according to our favorite aggressive evangelist. The Bible says it 13 times, I guess.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think Matt would have been better to focus on a horrible, misguided, and totally insane belief, yet is sort of prevalent among certain denominations, rather than this is obviously a fringe case, right? This is very much so a fringe case. So Cliff does have a point that it is a fringe, like it's one person that believes something really radical kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, having said that, I don't know how many Christians believe there's generals of hell that include Lilith and Asmodeus and things like that. And no idea now that I come to think about it. So,
yeah, there's quite a few today, the progressive Christianity, who have this opinion that hell was never intended to be a real place, that it was like a metaphor. I've heard a number of people refer to it as, oh, it's just there was a trash dump outside of Jerusalem where they incinerated the garbage. And so they would say,
Right.
oh, well, if God discards you, that's where you end up. You just get burned up like the rest of the garbage.
Oh, interesting. Where'd you hear that from? I've never heard that before.
A guy I went to high school with. I used to.
Oh, okay.
He was Lutheran and I was not, so we would debate often.
Mhm.
And that was the first place I've heard it, but other random people have said it over
Okay.
the years.
Yeah, right. I've not heard that one. I mean, it does make kind of sense that if you're burning away things that you don't want, then it's not a great jump to say, hey, if God doesn't want you, that's where you're going. You're going to be,
Yeah,
put with the trash, basically.
Yeah, soul garbage. I personally, I think God should recycle, which is probably
Yes.
why Hinduism seems like a friendlier faith, even though it
Right.
has many gods who are actual destroyers, because your soul gets recycled.
Yeah. Same with Buddhism. So, they're on the right track.
Preposterous. And that you even stoop to that level, Matt, is a sad
Stoop to what level? I'm really confused here, Cliff. I've asked for methodology. I've asked for
My example of an
methodology,
atheist
and
is
you
not
keep
supposed to
accusing me of
solve. My
stupid.
example of
You're
an
just going to be a
atheist is not-
judge.
Hold on, just to be sure that we're not
every
interrupting
time
each
you
other.
try
Yeah.
to slander me because you won't defend your beliefs.
Oh, I'm defending him all the time, Matt.
No, you're not. You're asserting them. You're
No, I'm
preaching.
not.
You haven't
I'm
provided a
giving
single bit of
evidence
evidence or methodology, and all you've done every time I raise an issue is say that I'm stooping, or I'm dabbling, or I'm misrepresenting Christians as stupid. I'm sorry that you don't have a robust methodology that would shine and show the truth of Christianity while demonstrating that Islam is not true, but you don't. If you did, you would have presented it.
I already have presented it to you. The resurrection of Christ is
It's not a fact.
Evidence. Now who's interrupting who, Matt?
I don't think you get to complain about that at this point, Cliff. Like, seriously.
Yeah, but I mean that's exactly it. It's like it's that old define a chair that covers everything that's a chair and excludes everything that's not a chair. How can you have a methodology that shows Christianity is true without also affirming every other religion?
Well, it can't. You've got to make the methodology inconsistent in order for that to work. Because if you're going to say, hey, well, this book says that these miracles happened, then any other book that says the same, you've got to apply the same thing to. But essentially what Cliff does is special pleading. It's I've got this book and it is true because it's a special book. Like, you can't actually describe any methodology that would apply to your book and not to somebody else's book.
Yeah. My book was hand copied by generations of monks having to use dippy pens for hundreds and hundreds of years, and now it's got golden trim. So, it's more special than all the other books.
Yeah.
I'm interrupting you.
The resurrection of Jesus Christ is overwhelming evidence that Christ is reliable. The evidence of a sinless life that he lived.
What evidence? This is the thing. You can't just say there is evidence, right? Like, the whole point about evidence, it is evident. You have to present it. You have to show and demonstrate that that is the case. Just saying, like when I said there's evidence my wife loves me, right? And then I went on to say, hey, she brings me coffee. She takes care. I listed the evidence. That's the part that you're not doing, Cliff. Like we say, what is the evidence? And you say, there's evidence. No, that's not an answer. No, I reject that. Bad, Cliff. Naughty.
He could look his enemies in the face in John chapter 8 and say, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? And his enemies were silent. The Apostle John, who knew him intimately for 3 years, could write.
Did that happen? How do we know that happened? How do we know? It's just a claim in a book. It's the book we're asking you to believe, to provide evidence for. What are you doing now? You're up to something.
Beamsy tagged me and gave a definition for a chair.
Oh, Beamsy. Yeah, okay. Well, that's technically true.
Yeah.
That's technically true.
In him is no sin. When you read the Sermon on the Mount, those are the teachings of an ethical genius. Jesus was an ethical genius.
Jesus was an ethical
He
genius.
died on a cross, loving and forgiving his enemies.
Okay. He who
Ethical
doesn't
genius.
hate his father and mother cannot follow me. He who does not hate his brother and sister cannot follow me. He who does not hate himself can never be my disciple. Yes. Super ethical, Cliff.
Super ethical, yes. And he who looks upon a woman with lust in his heart has committed adultery. Super ethical thought crime. Super ethical.
Oh yeah, I love thought crime, and
Oh yeah.
it bugs me that nobody, not even Matt, really ever addresses the corollary. Like, if you've already committed the crime just by thinking about it, then there's no ethical barrier to actually committing the crime. You're already guilty.
Right.
You may as well do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You're confronted by a guy who taught an amazingly high ethical standard and lived up to that standard. The evidence for Christ is so robust, it's embarrassing.
How do you know he lived up to that standard? I mean, he once went into the temple and overthrew tables of muddy.
Yep,
he
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Lost his crap at a pomegranate bush for not producing pomegranate. What are you talking about? Was it olive maybe?
Yeah, the olive tree that was out of season, and he's got miracle power, so he could just make it grow. But no, he was pissed that it was out of season. I mean,
right.
I relate to that. If I go into a Wendy's and they don't have the fish sandwich, or I go to McDonald's and they don't have the Shamrock Shake, I'm just, how dare you? Yeah.
And he didn't just attack the thing. He cursed the fig tree. Because I guess why not?
Yeah. Yeah, none of that has anything to do with whether Jesus is true, but asserting that because he is such a perfect moral being, he must therefore be true, that doesn't hold up at all. So in a way, we're kind of falling for Cliff's red herring, but it's still fun to talk about how
it's
really?
Don't get me wrong, there were good things that are in the New Testament that Jesus supposedly said. That's the thing. It's not, we're not saying there's no wisdom to be gained from here.
Yeah,
but
Sermon on the Mount was good stuff. Be humble, keep your religion to yourself. Don't go out and proselytize and try to pass laws about your beliefs on other people. Turn the other cheek's another good one.
Render unto Caesar what is Caesar,
Yeah.
Take note, freaking
help. The Good Samaritan is one of my favorite fables of all time.
Sure. Well, but
who cares who they are? Help people.
Sure, but you're not going to find wisdom that you won't find in other fables, like the a grasshopper and the ant kind of thing. The one that works is going to have things stored up, and the one that just lays about isn't going to have anything. These fables that we have, they impart it. I wouldn't go so far as to say he was a moral genius. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I were in the debate, I probably would have taken a slightly different tactic, because one of my favorite things lately has been a thing Godless Granny said, that Jesus was a rabbi. So he preached the Old Testament. He believed in the Old Testament. Yes. And the Old Testament contains events that we now know never happened, like crossing the Red Sea and the global flood. So if Jesus believed in those things, then he could not have been the incarnation of an omnipotent God. He would have known they were false. So either he wasn't God, or he was a heretic. It's another contradiction.
Well, but here's the thing. I think that to steelman their position, they kind of say when God was incarnate in the flesh, basically, as Jesus, he wasn't omnipotent and he wasn't omniscient, right? They kind of, because Jesus asked some questions that an omniscient God should know the answer to, right? He asked sort of, why have you forsaken me? And, what is the purpose of all of this? You're like, well, aren't you omniscient? But their way around that is to say, well, he wasn't when he was a man. That was just, it was a break from godhood kind of thing, which is really weird, and then comes the thing, well, did they sacrifice a god or did they sacrifice a man? And there's more questions on the back of that kind of thing. So, and how was he perfect if he didn't have omnipotence and omniscience, right? Because he's supposed to be perfect. Well, couldn't he be more perfect if he had omniscience? So it's just It's weird. It raises more questions.
That's that entire I forget the name of the argument, but that Anselm put forth. Like, I can imagine a greatest possible being. Yep. Actually existing is even greater than being imaginary. Therefore, the greatest possible being must be real.
Which is silly.
Oh, absolutely. But it's along the same lines.
Yeah. No, I get you. It's just completely silly.
There is no one who comes even close to Christ in credibility, in trustworthiness.
Jesus never wrote anything, Cliff.
Well, I mean, he wrote the whole Bible. Never mind that Cliff just said that the four Gospels were written by the actual apostles. No, Jesus wrote the whole Bible, according to the Bible.
But he says it's the most trustworthy. What have you heard from Jesus directly? Nothing. Because he never wrote anything. He never gave us anything. All of it is other people talking about what he said. And in that case, it doesn't matter how credible Jesus is. The people relaying the information has to be credible as well. I don't know where this guy gets his logic from. It's really weird. Really weird.
And you know it, if you think about it.
No, sir, I don't. And you can stop claiming what I know, because that's also dishonest. What I find,
if you'll, with an open mind, look at it.
So now your explanation is that I'm just not doing it with an open mind. Will you ever stop addressing me and what you think of me and actually present evidence for a resurrection?
Fine, evidence for the resurrection.
Yeah, this is what Matt needs to do. Mm-hmm. What is the actual evidence? Give the evidence, and then we apply a methodology to it, whether it is a reliable methodology or whether it was, basically Cliff's weird methodology that excludes other stuff. This is what he needs to do.
Yeah, and that's all we've ever needed is Christianity is true. The one claim that actually matters in all of Christianity is Jesus rose from the dead. The rest is up for discussion once we've shown that. It's a super simple question. Just answer that question.
That is the crux of the matter. You're welcome. See what I did there?
Mm-hmm.
The resurrection is he really died. And a Roman soldier took a spear and jammed in the side.
How do you know
that? Yeah. How do you know? There's always something that rang false to me about... I've always had a problem with the events afterwards as well, that Thomas said, and that Jesus didn't look like Jesus. He looked like some other dude. And nobody could recognize him.
And that was the body swappers.
That's weird to me. Like, why is he unrecognizable? And then Thomas sort of says and doubts and says, I don't believe you, kind of thing. And they let him feel the wounds with closed eyes. Something about that really, it really rings hollow to me. Why did they have to have his eyes closed? Like, what shenanigans? It sounds like a stage trick. I'll put the blindfold on, and then you can, feel all of this stuff. It's just very strange. I don't know what that's all about. It's weird to me. I'm not saying definitely they were pulling a fast one, but why, if you're being upfront, wouldn't you let Thomas investigate however he wants if you've got the truth on your side?
Yeah, like it's an ask me anything kind of thing. All I can speculate is that there were some cultural things that idioms and such don't translate well, cultural concepts perhaps that are no longer practiced. They can come across weird in description. Like, I could see, for example, he didn't look like himself. That could be something to be suspicious of, but it could also just be a flowery contemporary way of saying, because of the damage to his body, he didn't look like he used to. He could have been a different person because he just didn't look like he used to.
Oh, that's true. I don't know. There's just something about it that I don't know. I just yeah.
And an issue of watery serum flowed out separated from the side of Christ. We read in the Gospel of John. He was dead. They took his body off the cross. They anointed it with perfume, wrapped it in burial cloth, and laid it in the tomb, not a secret hideout tomb, a very well-known tomb, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. His disciples dispersed in disillusionment. There was no Passover plot. And 3 days later, he appeared risen from the dead to a group of women. And then over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people. And those people, many of whom were willing to die for what they claimed to have seen. The dead Christ.
The 500?
And for the
yeah. So we've heard, but we get nothing from those 500 people. Paul just asserts it. Also, Which women, how many, in what order, what else happened at the tomb? All 4 Gospels have a different tale about that. But my biggest question is very well-known tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Very well-known, common knowledge. Where's the fucking tomb, Cliff? If it's so well-known, show me the fucking tomb.
Well, I mean, Ron Wyatt, I think, claimed to find it, but Ron Wyatt claims to find, everything. He claims to find the Ark and the Ark of the Covenant and, just about every Christian relic and kind of thing. So, yeah, there's that. And what did the disciples do afterwards? Because in one story, they said they went to somewhere else, and in one story, they did something else. Like, they can't... They can't say that there's a no contradictions among that story. Like they just can't say that.
And that's such a weird thing too, because there's blatant plagiarism between them, and they couldn't even get the critical part of the story straight.
Yep.
The past 2,000 years, people have claimed to have met this Jesus Christ and that he has changed their...
And could I just point out, he said that the 500 were willing to die for him. That's not true. It just mentioned 500. Like, it was the disciples that were apparently willing to die for him, not the 500.
Yeah, I mean, even that isn't substantiated. Like, some of the disciples may have been willing to die, but being killed for your beliefs is not the same as willing to die for your beliefs. Well, they weren't given an opportunity to recant, like Galileo. Like, say this is wrong and you can live,
Yeah. Well, the problem is that some of them died and they, don't give a cause. They were just killed, basically, and they assume it's for their beliefs, but it never says that. Like, they never says that... I think it was Peter that died, killed by a soldier or something. It never says that he died for Jesus. It just said that he died.
He could have stolen a chicken. We don't know.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, done a Skyrim and attacked a chicken. Yeah, the town guard just cut him down. That's the kind of thing that is more just hyperbole. Like, they died. Well, they must have died for Jesus. How do you know? How do you know that? I mean, Joseph Smith died, kind of thing, and he didn't. You can say that he martyred himself and died for his faith, kind of thing. Sure,
I would say he died because of his faith.
well, it's more he died because he was a criminal. Like, trying
to start a civil war is that'll make a lot of people really angry,
and sort of had was basically trying to take over the state. And I might add, he was up for treason, charges of treason as well. So it wasn't like he really died for his faith. He more died because he committed criminal acts that people were really angry about. Like, really angry about.
Yeah, so that's a more accurate way to put it. Now, there are people who do die for their faith. We have a term for them, and it starts with a T.
Indeed. No, that's absolutely true, Amber. I'm glad you didn't say that. Thank you.
Changed their lives. Preeminent among them would be the Saul of Tarsus, who met Christ on the road to Damascus and had an incredible conversion experience and followed Christ. So there's overwhelming evidence that Christ...
That is called spectral evidence, sir. That is terrible evidence. He had a vision. That doesn't mean that... Yeah, what a load of baloney.
Yeah, I mean, he's running through the desert, chasing down wanted criminals, has a bit of sunstroke, perhaps, we don't know, because
we don't know.
There was one apostle who was a physician, and he was not present at the time. So,
right.
And
some people have suggested a stroke because of the lights and voices kind of thing. We just don't know. We just don't know.
Christ was dead, historically, and historically he rose from the dead.
Is any of that overwhelming evidence that you think you just cited not from the Bible?
Yes, I listed, you're not listening. I listed the names.
No, sir.
Clement Bishop of Antioch. Ignatius.
None of those people are attesting to the truth of anything that you just said. Those people are attesting to the fact that people believed those things and made those claims.
Witnesses.
No, sir. Those individuals.
Yeah, no.
No.
And
they're not saying...
If Antioch had been present at the crucifixion, somebody, at the very least he himself, would have made note of the fact.
And they were not saying that it happened. They were saying there are stories that it happened. There's a big difference between the two. They just noted down that people were carrying stories that a man was killed by crucifixion and rose from the dead. That does not mean that those people are attesting to that to be the case. You know, it would be like a historian writing down that a whole bunch of people claimed that the election was stolen and marched on the Capitol to burn it down. It doesn't mean that is the truth. It just means they're noting that event down.
Are not themselves eyewitnesses.
That's correct, but they talked to the eyewitnesses.
You have no way of demonstrating that, but hang on.
Hearsay.
Let's go ahead and assume.
What's up?
Hearsay.
Yeah,
they're not eyewitnesses. They talked to the eyewitnesses. Okay, cool.
That Matthew was an eyewitness. How do we know that Matthew is an accurate reporter of the facts that he supposedly witnessed?
First of all, you explore his document that he wrote carefully, checking such things as Greek manuscripts, checking such things as internal consistency, checking such things as archaeological support of the place names listed in the document.
Of the place names.
You go to other documents.
Oh, yeah, the place names. Those are another good one. A lot of people make the case, Jerusalem's real, the Sea of Galilee is real, all these things are real.
Yeah.
Right, cool, but there's every fiction story has, not everyone, some take place on, like, Star Wars Galaxy or whatever. But all the ones on Earth, they have real place names, like New York City or Cornfield Town, Iowa, or what have you. But checking for internal consistency just makes me frickin' laugh. Like, St. Augustine, his whole thing, he was a master of rhetoric, like a classically trained, he'd be a PhD today, and he went through the Bible with a comb and rearranged stories and changed wording and whatnot to make it more emotionally compelling. That was his entire thing. And even him doing that, it didn't, it's the end product we have today is the improved version of internal consistency, and it's just laughably bad.
Yeah, and so according to his logic, Pacific Rim happened because there's real places in that. It mentions Sydney, it mentions Hong Kong, it mentions all of these different places. You would have to evaluate that as a real story. Like that's ridiculous. And I think Matt usually uses the Spider-Man analogy. It mentions New York, it mentions the Empire State Building, but we would never just take that as saying, well, then the events occurred. So Stuart's conflating mundane claims with supernatural claims. Like, just because you claim, that there is a place called Jerusalem doesn't mean that all of the events of Jesus' life have to be true. It's just such a ridiculous argument, and it's so old. Like, it's it should never have been an argument in the first place. It is so illogical and irrational.
Archaeological evidence of the place names is corroborating evidence?
Yes.
So is the existence of New York corroborating evidence for Spider-Man?
There it is.
No, but it is corroborating evidence that I was born in New York City in 1954.
No, it's actually...
No, it's not. No, it's not. Cliff, no. If you say I was born in New York City, the city existing, I could say I was born in New York City, right? Yeah. The fact that New York exists is not corroborating evidence for that. Yeah. And in fact, I was not born in New York City.
Yeah, it makes it plausible, but because a thing isn't obviously false on its surface doesn't mean it's automatically true either. Drives me crazy.
Yeah, well.
Actually not. The existence of New York is not corroborating evidence that you were born there. It's just like the existence of New York is not corroborating evidence that I was born there.
It supports the claim that I make that I was born in Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. The fact that New York City is archaeologically...
The existence of a hospital...
The existence of the hospital is... Like, I could say that too, Cliff. It's not evidence for it to be true.
And that's kind of why this sort of thing is why I think that Cliff just doesn't really understand rational methodology, because maybe it's decades and decades of using emotional manipulation instead of rational thought, but
critical thinking. Yeah. It's nonsensical. Cliff is doing so badly here.
A hospital does not corroborate the claim that you were born there.
Statement that I was born in New York City. If there was no New York City, then you'd have good reason to question.
Correct. But you're committing a particular fallacy where you are reversing something. The fact that if there was not a Presbyterian hospital in New York City, then your claim that you were born there would clearly not be the case. But the existence of that hospital does not in any way demonstrate that you were born there. Just like the existence of Mars doesn't demonstrate that I was born on Mars if I were to claim that.
If you claim that you were born on Mars,
yeah.
The first question I would ask is Mars real? The second question I would ask is there any evidence that anybody has traveled to Mars and back? But the beginning point is Mars real? So, is Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, Rome real, or are they fictitious places?
Well, you could use that for Muhammad as well. You know, I'm not even sure what he was born, but let's sort of find out, and we can make the same argument that, hey, I don't know enough about, you know.
Yeah, Mecca is real, Medina is real, Jerusalem is real.
Right. So, so Mecca's real, right? And Mecca is where he was born. Of course, that's where Muhammad was born. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but because you have to face Mecca when you pray. But so he was born in Mecca. So Mecca is a real place. So does that make all the miracles of Muhammad true? Of course not. And this is the biased sort of intellectual consistency that Cliff has. He would apply that to the Bible, but he won't apply it to other texts.
Yeah, and it drives me crazy because some of Muhammad's miracles, not all of them, obviously, like splitting the moon, I'm super skeptical of that one. But some of Muhammad's miracles are actually verifiable. Like, he did conquer Jerusalem with a vastly inferior army. Now, you might not argue that's supernatural, but that's one of the things that's claimed as a miracle, and it actually historically happened.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they are real places, and as far as I know, they are contemporary places with the time of the story. So what?
So then you keep on going and ask, get more specific. Okay, what is the evidence that what this eyewitness wrote back in the 1st century has been carefully preserved today?
No. Whether or not what they wrote in the 1st century has been carefully preserved is irrelevant to whether or not what they wrote is accurate.
Yep.
I first need to know, do I have what they wrote?
Yeah,
if it's been totally perverted and changed.
Beowulf has been carefully preserved for... We're pretty close to the 1000th anniversary, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So, you know, it's old, so it must be true, right?
Is it
Grendel
carefully
for the win.
preserved?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could say is it carefully preserved, but I mean, we know that there's parts of the Bible that were made up, like the
and edited a lot
and edited. Well, the whole I think it's in the end of Mark where they're talking, they're handling snakes and talking in tongues. We know that was added. As Bart Ehrman says, we have copies without that in it. Older manuscripts without that stuff in it. It was added later. There's no even controversy among scholars about that. It just was added later. I can't remember what it's called. It's called the something verses. I just found an article by Bart Ehrman on how a Tennessee pastor died handling snakes, kind of thing.
Again.
Well, he obviously wasn't holy enough, kind of thing. You know?
Yeah.
Obviously wasn't holy enough.
It is a separate subject, but while you're looking it up, Sinister Porpoise just mentioned the satanic verses, and I've been seeing ads for Rushdie's satanic verses, which apparently are bits of the Quran that have been removed because they're too satanic or something.
Well, okay, so the satanic verses wasn't even a theological commentary. It was a novel. Right? This is the crazy part about it. It was a fictional novel. You might not have known that. It wasn't even really a commentary.
I did not, because the crossover between these religious mythologies and actual straight-up fiction, the line is so blurry. Unless somebody says so, you don't know. And that's kind of part of the problem. Yeah,
so it was basically a modern day novel inspired by the life of Muhammad. It wasn't actually the life of Muhammad, right? It's so strange that this got sort of, you know, the fact that it was a fictionalized sort of life of Muhammad is what they got angry about. So it wasn't even a theological book. It's a fiction. It's obviously a fiction. He never at any point said this is the real life of Muhammad. Yes, he did have to go into hiding, Joel, and he also got shot pretty recently, actually, within the last year, I think, by somebody. Was he shot outside of a theater or something? I'm struggling to remember it. I'm sorry. Oh, no, he's stabbed multiple times. He's about to give a public lecture in 2022. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy that a fictional book about sort of just an interpreted life of their holy person, it was written in 1988. So this has been going on, what, 40?
30 some years.
30, yeah, 30-something years, 36 years or so, 35 years? Yeah. And he was stabbed recently. Like, seriously, guys, it's just a book. Like, you know, it's so crazy because for a long time I thought it was a theological book, like a book being really critical of, you know, the Quran and things like that. It's not. It's a work of fiction. That's the crazy part. Yeah, yeah. Anyway.
Changed, that affects the issue very
Well,
profoundly.
considering we have no originals, you can't know how much it has changed. You can know that the copies intermixed. This is where the modern experts will know more than someone did in the 1st or 2nd century because they have more texts to compare to try to get back to determine what our oldest and best manuscripts are in comparison to what could have or likely was the original. But we don't know. But in any case, even if we were to assume that the version we have is almost identical or close enough to what it originally said, that in no way demonstrates the truth of those original claims.
Yeah, and we don't have the originals. We do not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is absolutely the case. Nobody will argue that we have the original text. Nobody. Like, not even the most fervent, that they know we don't have the original text. And it is entirely possible they were written down based upon oral history. That is entirely possible.
Yeah, there may have never been originals because of the oral tradition and things changing, playing the telephone game like that.
Yes, and passed along. And so if you think about it, these weren't written as sort of Jesus has his life. It's most likely that these are stories from people of their remembrances of things that occurred within his life. So how accurate could they be? Because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't remember that volume of stuff from my life. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous to say that they're definitely an accurate summation of the events. I don't see how they could possibly be.
I need to know regarding the Quran, the teachings of Buddha, the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Do we have the manuscript evidence today that gives us any degree of certainty that we really have what they wrote? Today, the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we have over 5,000 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. Before Gutenberg's printing press, we have 25,000 manuscripts, early manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts, 25,000.
Well, that's not great because, okay, there's lots of them, but they're handwritten, which means they're even more prone to error. If number of copies matters, I can, grab frickin' Secrets of the Witch by Silver Ravenwolf off my bookshelf, Xerox off 100,000 copies. Is it suddenly more true than the Bible now?
Mm-hmm. Of course not. It's almost like an argument from popularity, essentially. That's essentially it. Oh, Christianity got really popular. It's true. No, that's not how that works. That's just an appeal to popularity. That's all. If Islam becomes more popular, is that more true then? Like, what are you talking about? You don't get truth from what is popular.
Mm-hmm. Behold, flat earthers.
Sure. Sure. I don't think flat Earth has ever been popular, though. That's the thing. Not since the Greek days. Maybe during the Dark Ages a little, but I don't think that's ever been a really popular sort of viewpoint. I think
Not the modern parallax inspired version for sure.
Yeah.
You could. It's hard to go back to what was his name? Euripides, who did the thing with the sticks.
Eratosthenes.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pre him. I can't really say which view was
Yeah.
more popular or if people even really
Right.
cared.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, since Eratosthenes, I mean, people haven't really believed. Like, people have known that the world's been around for quite some time. Like, it's not something that we've really been confused about. I don't know why this sudden movement of flat earthers has sprung up. It's very, very strange.
Study of those manuscripts show that we have an amazingly accurate Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are in Latin Vulgate, in Ethiopic, Coptic, Armenian, as well as Greek. So the evidence is we have a very
there's accurate and then there's accurate, right?
Right.
Like, are they accurate to the supposed or non-existent originals, or are they accurate to the facts? Because, as we've already discussed, the versions of the same story have different details between all four of them. Like, you know, the guards and how many women and how many angels and whether the stone had been rolled away yet or not. Were the disciples to stay in Jerusalem or were they to get out of Dodge? All the details are so they're not internally consistent. So at best, only one of them can be accurate to the facts. And just like with multiple religions, only one can be right, but they all can be wrong.
Right.
Accurate presentation of what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote. Now read it and ask yourself, does the evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to Jesus being a fraud? If it does, reject him. Or does he...
The story isn't the evidence. It's barely even a fucking claim.
It is the claim. It is the claim. We're basically saying, how do we know that the Bible is accurate with what it says? And you've basically said, well, read it, and if it's accurate to the way Jesus lived. But it's the story that's telling us how, what kind of thing are you comparing it to? Because we don't know how Jesus actually lived. So, Cliff, what are you doing? This is so nonsensical. Like, read it and decide if it rings true. No, that's not how we evaluate if things are true.
Yeah. I mean, I read Wizard of Oz and I was like, man, Oz sounds really fucking cool. I really want to believe in this place. Maybe if I click my heels 3 times, or maybe I have to get sucked into a tornado. I don't freaking know.
Yeah.
But if I really believe, maybe I'll get to go.
This sort of belief is how people get killed by tornadoes, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I saw Twister before I ever got the chance, and I was like, the moral of this story is it's always better to stay in the diner and have steak and eggs.
Well, I just want to put this out there that Jesus said he would return, and Wizard of Oz says witches will get killed by tornadoes. Do you see any witches round?
Yeah, Odin said he would rid the world of frost giants. I haven't seen a frost giant in ages, so confirmation.
Do you think I have it? I have read it. I have read it. I think
being reliable.
I have read it. I think you are convinced that I've read it. I have not reached the same conclusion you did, in part because the number of manuscripts or copies that we have is a testament to their popularity and how strongly people believed. It is not in any way a testament to how accurate they recorded events.
Yes.
When they all agree to an infinitesimal degree,
they do not agree to an infant. Like,
what's your standard? If that's infinitesimal, what would a serious disagreement be?
The creation of the world doesn't even agree, Cliff. Like, that disagrees in the first 2 chapters. Like, come on, dude. What are you talking about? An infinitesimal degree.
I mean, and in the scale of the entire universe, right? Like, not even just the Earth. We're talking Andromeda Galaxy and Ton 615 and Quasar 3C273. All of in the scale of the universe. How many people went to the tomb? That's not really a very significant detail, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. an infinitesimal degree.
They don't.
It's serious evidence that they are accurate.
No, sir, that is simply not true.
Historically accurate.
I can pull every
Yes,
copy.
it is. Very quickly.
No, sir,
Just let me
no,
dissolve.
sir, it's not. And if you'd let me finish instead of trying to fucking
No,
run
you
over me like
interrupted
that.
me most recently, Matt. So
Oh,
don't.
all right, just to be sure.
No,
just to
sir,
be
I
sure,
said
we'll
that
walk
quickly while you
off
went on
the
a long.
He didn't interrupt him. He's just ranting and raving, like, and Matt didn't interrupt him. Like, he waited for you to finish.
I know. I hate to ad hominem a person, and like, you know, try to degrade their argument based on how they're behaving and whatnot. But honestly, Cliff's so upset, so red in the face, so overly emotional and
It's
irrational.
like this every time. This isn't unusual. I've seen so many debates with him. He usually keeps his calm a bit better when Stuart is around, his son is around, right? Because Stuart's a bit more sort of, he gets less upset kind of thing. But even then he gets grumpy and cranky, and it usually ends up Stuart talking while he sort of broods on the side and occasionally says something, you know, sort of inflammatory kind of thing. So Cliffe by himself does an awful job, like an awful job. Like, you can tell he doesn't want Matt to talk. You can tell that. It's not up for debate. He's trying to just silence him by talking over the top of him.
Yeah, and he could end this super simply by just providing some fucking actual evidence. Why would you even agree to this debate when you don't have anything to present? I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe he's just
Well, it
never quite
depends.
grasped the burden of proof.
Well, it depends, because I mean, I misread its debate topic recently when I was going in against David McQueen, and like I read it as like, is like, what's the evidence, scientific evidence for creationism? And it didn't make a big deal of difference, but maybe he had in his head like a different version of true. So is Christianity true as in, is it true for you kind of thing? You know, that sort of subjective, you know that sort of subjective beauty is truth kind of thing, you know, that philosophical sort of mumbo jumbo that sort of says, oh, well, you know, what is true for me? You know, basically what your core worldview is.
Yeah, like all the testimonials that you'll often hear from members of every possible faith, how, you know, once they turned to religion, their life got so much better. They stopped being an alcoholic. They stopped, you know, beating family members. They stopped losing every job within the first week. Things got better. Religion helped. So it's confirmation. Insert religion of your choice here is true.
Yeah,
but all of them have that.
All of them have that, and they're contradictory. So, you know, but Matt's like, you know, it has to comport with reality. I think maybe it would have, you know, it would have been good to find out what Cliffe actually thinks that true means, because we haven't defined it during this debate, have we? Did I miss that? Did they define what
very
true
very
means?
briefly in the begining? Matt did his usual thing about, no, actually, I don't think he did address truth. He was talking about fact, that it's, you know, justified true belief kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe they didn't even touch on what true.
On knowledge kind of thing is justified true.
That's it.
Yeah.
Long spiel. I can take every copy of Harry Potter and they will agree to an infinitesimal degree. Does that mean that what they say is true?
No.
And agree more than the Bible.
Very much.
Just saying. You know, when Harry Potter, you know, finds his godfather, you know, they won't disagree on what they did afterwards. Bible does.
No, but it means
That's my point.
Copy of Harry
That's
Potter.
my point. And your argument is the fact that we have many manuscripts that agree to an infinitesimal degree, which is not quite true, but they do agree strongly.
Yes, it is. Very
Your argument that you just made was that this is strong evidence that what they say is true, and that is simply fallacious, as
I know,
demonstrated by your
you
own
misunderstood.
response just a moment ago. I can't hear you.
My
I can't hear you if I'm still talking.
Hold on one sec, just to be sure. That.
Yeah, I can't hear you because I'm still talking. No, I love Matt's response. Like, he's not going to stop talking just because he wants to hear what Cliffe says. Cliffe, what are you doing? Why are you so angry?
Why are you like this, Cliffe?
Why are you like this, Cliffe? Yeah, no, he does.
Has
so much
Jesus
better
hurt
with
you,
Cliffe.
Cliffe? Did Jesus do unspeakable things? Show us
Punch
on the
on the
doll where
doll.
Jesus touched you, Cliffe.
Yeah, where atheism touched you. Yeah.
I think it is, but probably there's maybe a bit of a delay. Just to be sure we heard the last part from you, Matt. And
There's no delay, mate. What are you talking about? James, you're so, he really does try to be generous, and, James is actually a nice guy. Like, he's a really, really nice guy. Yeah, it does. That's funny. It's a delay.
And then we'll kick it right over you, Cliff, because like I said, I do think there's a connection thing where it is a little bit slow. What was the last thing maybe like the last half sentence or so that you mentioned there, Matt?
Cliff agreed that no matter how much the Harry Potter books agree, or how many copies there are, or for how long it's published and maintains this, that does not in any way demonstrate the truth of what's in those books. And yet he wants to, for Christianity, talk about the various manuscripts and how closely they agree, and say that this is strong evidence that what they say is true. That is a fallacious line of reasoning by his own admission. You don't get to special plead that the Bible.
Yeah, there we go. Special pleading. Yep. So he's got an inconsistent methodology. He's applying it to the Bible in one way, other books in another way. I don't know how he's going to argue that his methodology is consistent. I really do not.
Is somehow reliable because of its agreement on its copies, while saying that other books that agree on their copies aren't true.
Ready for you, Cliff, if you're able to.
Whenever I read an historical book, I have 4 tests that I use to determine historical reliability. The first test is literary style. Is it once upon a time in the land of Nod, Lincoln and Nod took a boat ride? Or is it at this time, in this place, with these people around, Jesus said this and did that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sort of the Old Testament does read a bit of that, in the land of, in the Garden of Eden, where, God breathed life into dust kind of thing. It is a bit of that.
Yeah, Cliff talks about things ringing true as his methodology of proof.
Right.
Him saying the first thing I check is style, that sets off my skepticism detector, I'm like,
right.
The fuck does that have to do with anything?
Right. Does that mean that if I write a story that's absolutely rubbish, like about a talking cat, but I write it in a way that is very, very factual, of course that doesn't make it true.
Yeah, the script of Garfield the movie. Garfield enters. Yeah. Garfield says something about lasagna, whatever.
Right.
The second test is, what is the manuscript evidence? And the manuscript evidence for the New Testament is overwhelmingly clear that we have an accurate presentation.
No.
How do you know it's accurate? That's the whole point. You don't have the originals. Even if there is originals, like, how do you know it's accurate? We're not talking about accurate with previous manuals. We're talking accurate to the actual events.
And exactly. Even if we did have the damn originals, and they're still claiming, Superman dropped by and raised Lazarus from the dead. Cool story, bro, but that doesn't mean it's true.
Right. Cliff, what are you doing?
Of what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote. Doesn't mean it's the truth, but we have an
It doesn't mean that it's the truth.
Then your criterion is useless.
And then concede the debate, because your entire debate of Christianity is true hinges upon this, of those accounts being true. And if you just basically say halfway through, well, it doesn't mean that it's true, then how do you know?
Yeah, chuck that criterion out the damn window and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
I mean, even Gary Habermas he famous for the minimal facts argument. When one of his facts turns out to be useless for establishing his case, he chucks it, which is why his number of minimal facts keeps going down.
Accurate representation of what they wrote. Third test, archaeology. Does archaeology support and verify the place names, the names of the rulers, like Pontius Pilate?
For fuck's sake, Cliff.
This has already been debunked. Like, yes, it does. But does the archaeology support Jesus rising from the dead? No, very much no. Because we have records, like even the Bible and the stories in it, like the census, for instance. You do not return to your place of birth for a census. You do not. Mm-hmm. That is not something that happens. Archaeologically and sociologically, the Romans have done tons of censuses that we've been aware of, and they do not make you return to your place. That is not, the Bible's account of the census is just not supported, Cliff.
Yeah, and another rather important point is I see where Cliff is coming from with the confirming the place names and rulers and whatnot. Because if we can confirm that, like the story talks about King Herod, if King Herod reigned, hundreds of years earlier, then clearly there's a flaw in the story. But here's the thing: how do we know when these rulers were ruling? Because there's records. We can check the records and find out when they ruled. The fact that there are records from this time and they don't talk about a dude raising from the dead and bringing half of the graveyard into Jerusalem with him is a bit of a red flag.
Yes, absolutely. So there are all these problems with the archaeology, like massive problems.
Herod Agrippa. Yes, archaeology verifies the New Testament, like the Pool of Siloam in the Gospel of John. And then fourth test is, are there contradictions within the text that point to massive confusion on the part of the authors? No, there are no contradictions in the Gospel.
Really? There's no contradictions in the Gospels. I think there are contradictions in.
Yep, no contradictions.
Like it even.
Cliff's trying to murder me over here. Oh, for fuck's sake.
There's massive contradictions in the Gospels, right? Like even to do who was ruling at the time, who like where that Jesus was born. There's massive contradictions in the Bible. Okay, so one of the famous ones is the Bible says that God was Jesus' father and not Joseph, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus has the bloodline of David because he's descended from Joseph, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's a contradiction.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, mate.
It's like right at the damn start.
That's just one of many, many contradictions.
In the Gospels, there's a tremendous internal harmony and consistency. That does not mean the Bible's a word of God. It doesn't mean anything other than these Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historically reliable. Simply read them as history and ask yourself, does the historical evidence point to Christ being credible or does it not?
It doesn't point to Jesus being anything. Like it's just why? It doesn't matter how credible Jesus is. The people writing the stories have to be credible. This is painful. This is absolutely painful.
Mm-hmm. But funny as hell.
Okay, so first of all, I'm glad that we have 4 crisp criteria by which you're going to evaluate historical texts. Whether or not something...
What's the over and under that he's going to get interrupted by Cliff during this, addressing these 4 things? Like, he's not going to try and let him go.
I'm going to say 50-50 within the first minute, but if it goes beyond a minute, it's going to increase by 10% for every 5 seconds.
That's very specific, and I love it. That's amazing.
Fits in a historical text, I'm assuming, is just that it's old. It's something we can't go back and investigate because we don't have a time machine. So it's a text about a period of time. So the first one you look at is the literary style. Once upon a time, those sorts of things to see what kind of style is. When I look at the Bible, I, like many Christians, have a difficult time taking Genesis as a literal account. It is factually incompatible in its order of events with what we know from the scientific investigation of order. It is absolutely storybook-wise about a fall and a talking serpent who leads someone astray and leads somebody else astray. I find the character of God to be comical throughout the Old Testament, of constantly trying to get humanity to love him and do right, and he has to keep starting over. He puts them in the garden, it fails, he kicks them out of the garden. He then has to confuse everybody's languages and flood the whole earth except for a handful of people to start over again, and then he has to select his chosen people from all of the various peoples after starting over again, and then he takes a big long vacation until he supposedly comes down in human form. I find that to be more characteristic of mythicism and storytelling.
Matt skipped over one of my favorite parts. When After he fictitiously frees everybody from Egypt and leads them into the desert and does the Mount Sinai thing. And they're all making the golden calf and whatnot. And Yahweh's like, those dirty bitches. I'm going to smite all them motherfuckers. And Moses is like, whoa, simmer down, God, simmer down. And God simmers down. Like, it's another instance of Yahweh changing his mind because a mortal is like, dude, you're being too hot-headed. You're going to look bad in front of all the other gods.
Well, the better one is Lot, like, tricking him, like, from everybody into this, like, needing to find tons of people that are good in the city down to one good person kind of thing. Like, and that does read, it really, I have to agree with Matt, it does read like fables and myths kind of thing. Like, here's a lesson to be learned kind of stuff. It really does read like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's over and over throughout Genesis and Exodus, there's I am your Lord, fear your Lord. Like, the ancient Hebrews made no bones about the fact that their God had evil in him as well as good. Like, he would protect them, but he would fucking kill you if you crossed him. And they didn't have a problem with that because they were okay with nuance. They were like, our God is fucking scary. Maybe another God would be nicer, but this one takes care of us. So, we're stuck with him.
I mean, and never mind the talking snake as well. What about the talking donkey? That is obviously a fable. Like, a guy basically is beating his donkey because it won't move. And the Lord talks through the donkey, and the donkey starts talking, and he has a conversation with the donkey, right? This ass basically says, why are you beating me? I'm so upset at this. And the guy's just like, my first thing would be like, holy crap, a talking donkey. But he just carries on a conversation.
Yeah.
Right, It's just perfectly normal. And there's just it reeks of, here is a story about what happens to people when they mistreat that. Don't mistreat your animals, because God might talk through them and call you a bitch or whatever. Like it's only like to say that, hey, it's sort of, its style is real. It's not.
Yeah, it definitely, he talks about the once upon a time thing. Yeah, it comes off like a fable, but I love that talking donkey story because that was such a laughing stock in the ancient Middle East that you're familiar with the tales of Shahrazad, the 1001 Arabian Nights. One of my favorite stories from that is a convicted thief. He's about to be executed, and he tells the king, hey, wait, don't kill me, because I can do something no one else in the kingdom can do. And the king says, what's that? And he says, I can teach horses to talk. And the king's like, bullshit. And he says, well, you know what? Give me a year. If it doesn't work, then you can execute me and you've lost nothing. If it does work, though, you get a talking horse. And the king's like, you make a compelling argument. So he gives him a year. And then the guy he gets sent back into prison. And his bunkmate says, how did you manage to not get executed? And so he tells his bunkmate. And his bunkmate says, well, what are you going to do? You have a year and then you're dead.
Yeah.
And he just kind of stretches back and he says, well, either I can do it or I can't. But I've got a year. And who knows? Maybe the horse will learn to talk.
Well, you know what I think? I think, if you are hatching an escape plan, having access to horses is probably a good idea.
Yep, definitely a good start. But yeah, the reason I tell that is because it's what is it? Anachronistic is when something's out of time. Apocryphal. But it's been opined that story was in the collection to make fun of the talking donkey story.
Right.
It does the miraculous claims, the things that raising people from the dead and walking on water and turning water to wine, of demons and all these other things. These things to me read more like a storybook. Doesn't mean they're not true, but they read more like a storybook. Your second one of manuscript evidence that leads you to conclude that we have an accurate presentation of what the author said is irrelevant to the truth. I could just say, hey, we have 100% accuracy on what the author said, and that doesn't in any way tell us whether or not it's true, which even you acknowledge when going through the criteria. on archaeology. You're like, does archaeology support things with like the place names? Well, first of all, I don't find it remotely surprising that books written in a certain time period and in a certain area might reference real places and real events. We do that in our fiction all the time. And most other stories that you might not accept as true from other religions also support place names. But there isn't archaeological evidence to support a resurrection. There isn't archaeological evidence to support the sun standing still. There isn't archaeological evidence to support a global flood. There isn't archaeological evidence of demons or any of the things like that. And then the last one is a really intriguing one about contradictions. And we can have a discussion sometime about whether or not there are contradictions. Trying to reconcile the Easter accounts is something that I haven't seen anybody successfully recount who was there when, what happened when, and in what order. Depending on which of the Gospels you go to for that particular narrative, there's a different order of events and different people involved. And what tends to happen is that apologists say, yes, the specifics.
Yeah, so sort of Cliff sunk himself with this one, because ordinarily they'll say, oh, just because they didn't recount certain events in it doesn't mean that something else didn't have, that they all had their own perspective kind of thing. But Cliff has pinned himself down to they line up with what was it, infinitesimal amount?
Yeah, infinitesimal degree of accuracy.
Of consistency. Yeah. So you've shot yourself there, Cliff, because now even if you do say, hey, they're from different perspectives, well, your point about them being incredibly similar, you can't stand on that anymore.
I'm actually going to disagree on that one. I think Cliff successfully red herringed Matt off of the topic of backup Christianity into fighting over the minutia of the specific elements within the Gospels. Because it doesn't matter if those are true or not. Because it doesn't, if they're consistent, it doesn't matter. You have to show Jesus actually rose outside of the Bible. And he's got Matt talking about what's inside the Bible instead of pressing the attack.
No, that's true. Yeah, no, good point. But he doesn't have any evidence outside the Bible.
No, I'm also not convinced Cliff did it on purpose.
Well, he's certainly not looking strong, but he won't have anything to talk about outside the Bible. Like he's got nothing to talk about. So I think Matt's just addressing whatever he brings up as evidence. But he's got nothing outside the Bible. It's all the Bible.
Yeah, that's the predictable thing about Matt is he will dismiss your evidence from the helicopter view, but then he will continue to drill down into. He's a completionist about that. He wants to knock out your argument at every level, like he's playing Jenga in reverse.
And that's what I mean. Cliff's obviously angry about it. I'm amazed he didn't interrupt, though. I kind of would have bet that he did interrupt somewhere in there, but he hasn't yet.
I lost count of the time, but I think he beat the spread I laid out.
Beat the odds, yeah. That's okay. That's good. And I mean, that's one. Well done, Cliff. You're learning. Well, maybe you're not learning self-control. Maybe you're just tired of arguing. But
it may be wrong because you have different people telling the story, or they might be viewed from a different perspective. But it tells the consistent narrative, and therefore there's no contradictions. But here's a question: is it possible for a story to have no contradictions and still not be true?
That's why I asked you to take all 4 tests together. Now,
no, sir. No, sir.
He asked you a very direct question, Cliff. Why can't you answer questions like it's just
a classic?
Why can't you say, yes, it is possible for that to be consistent and not correct, but you do have to incorporate the other things into it? Like, you can answer the question and provide clarification at the same time. Like, Matt isn't running a gotcha. Like, he's not saying, hey, you either have to answer yes or no, and that's all. He'll allow you to clarify. Like, this is what I don't understand. Just because you make a concession on a very small point and then clarify what you mean doesn't mean you're just... Like, too many people in debates think that they can't concede anything at all. Like, literally nothing. Even if it's obviously true. It's okay. You can concede small things and say, but that does not necessarily make what you're taking from it true. I don't understand this. It just comes across as belligerent, Like, I mean, Matt, he was like, yes, I concede that Jesus could have been a real person or a series of people or, existed in reality. And that doesn't get you to Christianity. Like, he said, yes, that he existed and then clarified, that's fine. I don't, yeah. But Cliff's like, oh, I'm not conceding anything. It's just like, dude.
Yeah, it's almost an Eric Hovind, like, I have all the knowledge and I'm absolutely right. Period.
Mm-hmm. Because God told me.
Mm-hmm.
I asked a question. I have more questions.
I already answered your question.
No, sir, you didn't. You replied with, that's why I had to look at all four. Why are you so upset, Cliff? It's a simple question.
You're cutting me off.
Is it possible? Is it possible?
I let you speak. Now you won't let me speak.
Yeah, you're not answering the question, and I get he's cutting you off, but maybe he shouldn't be. Maybe he should be waiting and then saying, "Hey, you didn't answer my question," and go back to it. I don't know. I think Matt just wants an answer to his question, and they outlined his thing, and we went, "Here's a question." Yeah. So, yeah.
Is it? I'm still going. Is it possible for there to be no contradictions and the story still not be true? Yes.
Yes.
Right. Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible.
Hang on. Is it possible for there to be manuscript evidence that the authors were correct, or authors are being accurately reported, and yet their claims are still not true? You already said that. Yes to that when you were there. Yes. Is it possible for archaeological evidence to support place names, and yet the events still aren't true?
Yes, it's called historical fiction.
Sure. Is it possible?
Style.
Is it possible for you to look at a literary style?
Come on, bud. Let's be.
All right. Maybe he isn't allowing him to clarify, but yeah, I don't. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think.
I mean,
yeah,
he's aware of historical fiction. Hooray, Cliff!
So what makes the Bible not historical fiction?
Yeah, like if he's aware of it, why does he keep making this claim that is so easily dismissed? Why waste your time with it?
I don't know.
But let's be honest here.
I'm trying to cover your 4 points, Cliff. Are you so dense that you can't see that? I'm going through your 4 points as a rebuttal to your position.
No, Matt, just calm down, mate. Cliff's going to be like this. Just definitely going to be like this. Think of your heart, Matt.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah, getting all worked up. He's got his 4 points though. Also, that tells us the difference in brightness between Matt's forehead and Matt's fingers. That tells us a lot about where Matt keeps his light.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
I didn't really care, but sure.
Sure. Photography thing. I try to look for where the lights are.
It's possible. I won't even ask the question. Here we go. It's possible. It's possible for there to be no contradictions and the story's still not true. It's possible that archaeology could support place names and the story's still not true. It's possible that the manuscripts could accurately reflect what the author said and the author's still not true. It is possible that the literary style could be misunderstood, story-wise or accurate, and the story is still not true. So the 4 criteria that you gave for determining the accuracy of a historical text are incapable of doing that on their own. You have a failed methodology. That was the point.
Then give me a better one. How do you test the historical reliability?
Then fix the problems I have with my methodology.
It's not my job to make your case, bro.
Well, and I don't think it can be fixed. I don't think it can be fixed. I think that, like, if somebody had you guys have been looking at proving the Jesus story for over 2,000 years now. If there was a better methodology, I kind of think they would have come up with it by now.
You would think so, but that's actually a fallacy. It's a version of Ad Populum. Like, a lot of people have looked at it. They haven't come up with a better one. I wonder if it's possible that nobody has ever actually tried applying a scientific methodology to the question. Like, let's take it as a hypothesis. Jesus lived and resurrected, okay? And then the anti-hypothesis is Jesus didn't. What tests could we construct that could make a determination between those two hypotheses?
That's not how the scientific methodology works. So one is going to be the null hypothesis and one's going to be the alternative. The thing that you want to prove is always the alternative hypothesis. The null is always the one that you're not trying to prove. So basically you would assume that an event didn't happen and basically look at falsifying the event, right? So basically you'd be looking for evidence that it didn't happen. And if you can't find the evidence, then you would fall back on the default, which is that it didn't happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't think of a good criteria. Like, even if we did find this famous tomb that everybody knew about, it wouldn't really prove anything. Like, if we found a body in it, maybe that's Jesus, maybe it's not. If we didn't find a body in it, maybe Jesus was not, who knows? So that's not really a good falsification criteria. if we
Right.
found the true cross, if we found the Holy Grail, really, to me, the only thing that would back up even plausibility for the story is if we found a relic and it had demonstrable supernatural properties, like the real Holy Grail actually
Yeah,
did
yeah.
cure all illness or something, you know?
Or a Spear of Destiny or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So to falsify it, you could find Jesus' body.
There's actually a book about that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Hitchens mentioned it in one of his debates. It's an old novel from 1904. It's called When It Was Dark by Guy Thorne. It's available through Project Gutenberg, so you can find a free PDF if you're interested.
Okay.
But basically, the summary version is it's a novel, and it's from 1904, so it's a lot more wordy than it needs to be by modern standards. But the summary is, they find a tomb in Jerusalem. There's a stone blocking the doorway. They roll the stone away, and inside there's a body. And this body shows signs of having been scourged, and there's a dried up old crown of thorns, like, behind the head, and there's a clear stab wound in the side, and everybody's like, oh shit, this is fucking Jesus, right? And
Yeah.
he clearly didn't raise from the dead.
Right.
And then the novel explores the implications of that. The author goes a little bit overboard with it. Spoiler alert for a book from 1904. But basically, the world just abandons morality because apparently 100% of the entire world's population is Christian. And once Jesus is debunked, there's no more morality at all. Everybody's like, oh, it's all garbage, whatever. And people are fornicating in the streets, and it's like the Purge. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Everything just goes crazy. And
Well,
yeah.
all I
so
can
it's
say is
fascinating.
at least they didn't write it about Muhammad's place of death. So, because
Yeah. But it's a fun exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any document? What are the
I
tests?
don't need to give you a better one. I'm not here defending historical claims.
Baloney. If you're sharing my 4 points,
Oh, baloney. You have to come up with a better methodology for proving my Jesus is real.
Yeah.
What
You
are
know
you
Cliff is
talking
worked up
about?
when he starts invoking deli meats.
Yeah. Yes.
4 points down, which you have every right to do. You
Thou shalt not take deli meats in vain.
Absolutely.
had better give me a more intellectually acceptable
No,
alternative.
sir. That's not the way. That's not the way any of this works.
Now
You
you're calling
presented a
out-
case. I
Now you're committing
debunked it.
intellectual
Now you
suicide,
have to go back to the
You don't have
drawing
the
board.
honesty. You
and
step
you
forward.
have
Hold on one
to come up
second.
with
I
an
gotta interrupt, guys.
analogy
Just to be
because
sure-
you are
just
the
to be sure
one
that
who
everybody
just
can hear
got
I have no idea why Cliff is demanding a better methodology from Matt. I mean, I would give one. I would say, hey, well, the scientific methods seem to be a really good way to do it. So, observation, rigor, reliability, robust evidence. You could provide something like that, and he'd say, well, there's no way you can do that with Jesus. Yes, that you're correct.
That's sort of the point, Cliff.
Yeah, that's sort of my point. But just the ridiculousness of one interlocutor asking the other one to provide a methodology in which he can cause himself to lose the debate is just so baffling to me. Like,
just
Can
got
hear each-
exposed
I
as
just want to
irrational.
just jump in really quick before. So, quick heads up, folks, that we'll go into the Q&A shortly. By that, I mean 5 to 10 minutes tops. But I do want to let you guys continue, because I know you might have some final threads you want to draw together before we do go into the Q&A.
Yeah, when your methodology gets debunked, it's not up to the opponent to present a methodology that would confirm the supernatural. I have no methodology that would confirm the supernatural. Neither does anybody else. You presented your case for why you find these texts reliable. I exposed where the problem is. You don't then get to say, well, have you got a better one? Because that suggests that you're willing to stick with a flawed methodology until somebody comes along with a better one. It's
and it sort of you've admitted now that your methodology doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
That tacitly says, well, yeah, okay, so it doesn't work. What's yours?
Yeah. How do you confirm my supernatural I don't confirm. I'm saying they're garbage. That's why we're debating.
So that's a really bad move. Saying, well, how do I do it then? Maybe you can't.
Yeah.
And that tacitly says, hey, yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah. What can you do? I mean, you could concede and just go straight to the Q&A and you know, whatever.
Sure. Did you see that one with Grayson and the guy that just outright quit?
I
was
have
hilarious.
not. I've been hoping Grayson would repost it. Maybe he has. I haven't checked his page recently.
Yeah, it's on his channel. I saw it on his channel.
Because I prefer to watch the mirrors of those kinds of things. But yeah, it sounded amusing.
It was Robert Sturgis, who was introduced as Dr. Robert Sturgis. I think it was Robert Sturgis, and looked him up, and yeah, he's a doctor like Dr. Hoven's doctor, you know. So yeah, so yeah, he just quit about, you know, half an hour into it, just noped out, you know. Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, he in some ways there's a little bit of dignity in surrender. At least you're, you know, being somewhat intellectually honest. Like, okay, you beat me. I got nothing. You win this time. You know, you win this round, gadget. But like you could pull a perfect Dawa and just start pitching your own shit in the middle of the debate.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? You've got an audience. Go for it.
Or you could do an idea and take to the comments and just try to convince everybody that you won. Like
like Daniel Hakikachu does.
Yeah.
Every time he gets slaughtered in a debate, within a week, he'll post a video that's Ray Comfort clips in order to make it look like he won. And he'll be like, dominating arrogant atheists for the glory of Allah. It's like, oh my God, dude, you're such an embarrassment.
Yeah. But like there's certain people like Nadir and Kyle that just take to the comments about like people going, oh, they got trounced so hard, and they say, oh, you must have been watching a different debate. I slaughtered this debate. Look, if you slaughtered in the debate, you wouldn't have to take to the comments trying to convince people that you did. You'd be happy with your performance and say, yes, you know, it'll stand on its own merits. Like it always amazes me that people do that. Like, I don't see why they're doing it. You know, I mean, what are you going to say? If that's your opinion of the debate, that's your opinion of the debate. If you think that I've done terribly, then you think I've done terribly. That's fine. You know, I don't have to try to convince you otherwise. Like, that's what the debate was for.
Well, we could have a debate about how well you did in the debate.
That's a good one. I haven't thought of. Yeah. Well, we have to do a definition debate beforehand to debate definitions of things. Yep. And so then when we will do the actual debate and then do a debate afterwards for how well we did during the debate.
And then the after party.
Yep.
It's not my job or anybody else's job to fix the foundation of your beliefs. That's your job.
To be a skeptic is good. A skeptic is someone who questions. But to be a cynic is horrendous. Because cynicism gets...
Cynic! It's horrendous.
Yep. Those horrible cynics.
He's not being cynical. He's just being skeptical. And like, I don't see how you got cynicism from that.
Well, you're not believing my nonsense. Makes you cynical.
Cynicism gets us nowhere. And Matt, you have just displayed tremendous cynicism because what you've done is you've said, these are the problems with your methodology. And I agree with you. There are problems with my methodology. But Matt, none of us has exhaustive knowledge in any area of life. We as human...
No one says we have to.
Yeah, they're not related. If you know there's a problem with your methodology, maybe work on that. It's like you know, people of all walks of life are always saying, if you try to build a house on a foundation made of sand, it's gonna fall over. Maybe fix the foundation first.
And he said that, like, earlier on, like way earlier in this commentary, I sort of said he's trying to smuggle in this absolute knowledge with, you know, a reasonable level of certainty. He's trying to replace one with the other. Like, we're not saying you have to have absolute knowledge of stuff. We just have to say you have to be reasonably certain you've got the facts. But Matt's pointing out why your methodology doesn't even get you to reasonable certainty. It doesn't. So, you know, okay.
We as human beings cannot prove anything. Instead, we as thinking human beings take the evidence that we have and then make the most reasonable, the most plausible conclusions. So my point was simply, the evidence is the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John give us accurate historical information. My point was not that they're perfect. My point.
Why are you so angry, Cliff? Why are you so angry? every time I've paused it, he looks like this. Every time.
Was not that there's without error. I never said that. Instead, I gave 4 pieces of evidence.
He's like he's chopping a salad that's resisting him or something. It's aliens, damn it!
Just as I've been through this, every time I've paused it, he's looked something like this. Why are you so angry, Cliff?
Evidence that I use whenever trying to determine whether any document is historically accurate or not. Now, the mistake that you're making, sir, is very clear. If I say that a interpretation that I have of the Quran is contradicted by science, in order to be intellectually honest, I have to go back and study, is my interpretation of the Quran correct? Because if my interpretation of the Quran is incorrect, then it is intellectually dishonest for me to say the Quran contradicts science. Similarly, if you have a wrong interpretation of the book of Genesis, and then you say science contradicts my interpretation of creation and of a serpent.
The problem is you can't tell which is the correct interpretation. You all disagree on it. That's the problem. Like, he's sort of saying, hey, one interpretation is the correct one. Is that yours, Cliff? Are you talking about yours?
Yeah, like I'm just like, what do you even like? I don't think Cliff is really aware of the scientific method either. Like, the whole point is to remove your own biases from the process to the greatest extent possible. And like, it shouldn't be your interpretation of the Quran contradicts science. It should be science contradicts your supernatural claim, whatever the hell it is. It's science does the debunking, not the other way around, unless you can demonstrate. If you can, do a healing, lay on hands and start chucking globs of meat and say you've cured people of cancer and yay, they can walk again, hallelujah, past the collection plate. If you can do that, by all means, knock yourself out. But until then, we want to see how stuff lines up with what we can verify is true, not how the stuff that we already verified is true is contradicted by the questionable stuff,
It's a very weird way to put it. Yeah, no, I got what you mean. Yeah.
Serpent in a garden. But if your interpretation is incorrect, you're committing intellectual suicide because you are showing that science contradicts.
Intellectual suicide.
You have dishonored your intellect. You must commit seppuku.
Seppuku. Intellectual harikari.
Yes.
False interpretation. Well, so what? I agree with you. The question is, what is an accurate interpretation of Genesis, and does science contradict that accurate interpretation of Genesis? And my point is rather simple. There is
absolutely. You can't even get to what is an accurate interpretation of Genesis.
Yeah. Which one's the accurate one?
Okay, people have different interpretations. How do you then show which is the right one? And I've got a funny feeling it's whatever lines up the most with science, but even the most generous interpretation doesn't line up with science, because the book outright states that the world was created before light, right? Or the sun and the moon, right? That the earth was created before the sun and the moon. And we know from science that is not, it's just not true. It's just not. I'm sorry. The way that stars formed and then accretion disks happened and then stellar formation and the solar system formed is just not what it says in the Bible. Sorry.
Yeah,
there is absolutely no science.
Sorry?
Oh, I was just, yeah.
Yeah.
In Genesis to contradict. There's no biology, no zoology, no astronomy, no science anywhere.
There is cosmology, sir.
There's all of those things. I mean, there's no specificity to the astronomy, but it does say that the stars were created after the Earth, I think on day 4. And it may not talk about specific stars or constellations or galaxies or positions, but it doesn't fucking matter because we know that's not true.
Right. But it does talk about cosmology. It does. You can't get away from that, Cliff. It does. And astronomy, it does talk about that because it talks about the stars being created. How is that not astronomy? Astronomy deals with stellar objects. That is okay.
Yeah.
And biology. It talks about how all the animals were created. As How is that not biology?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
and
weird.
and based on where they live, not based on
Yeah.
species or complexity. No, we're going to do the land critters, and then we're going to do the water critters, and then we're going to do the air critter, because the critters of the air are always in the
They always come last. Everybody knows.
I probably
Come on.
got the order wrong, but I'm not the one advocating for this, so it doesn't matter.
Right. There's absolute bullshit.
Where in the Genesis account. That is why, for anybody to say, oh, I can't believe Genesis because it contradicts science, is intellectually dishonest, because there's no science in Genesis for modern science or ancient science to contradict. It's that simple.
Can we
You heard
have
it first,
Cliff
no science.
do a cage match with Ray Comfort? Because that would be amazing.
Yeah.
There's no science. It's all science. There's no science. It's all... We'll have to throw a banana down between them.
Like, you know that things don't have to be science for science to contradict it. Do you know that? Like that if someone says, "Hey, my miracle snake oil here can cure cancer," just because that's not science doesn't mean the science can't contradict it. You do realize that, don't you, Cliff? Like the whole idea that because your claim isn't a scientific claim, then science can't evaluate it.
Yeah, science
It's
needs to
just
stay in
ridiculous.
science's lane. Stay in
Right,
the universities.
What a weird statement to make. Like that's just weird.
Yeah, it's just like medicine should stay in the hospitals. Doctors shouldn't like recommend changes in your lifestyle to help you improve your lifespan. They should stick
Right.
to just fixing broken bones and shit.
Oh, but if they do, they're intellectually dishonest.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Okay, so in Genesis, when it lists the order of events that God created, supposedly, is that order accurate to the order that things were actually created?
Augustine answers your question back in the 400s.
I'm not debating
He points out-
Augustine.
He points out, I'm using it as an illustration, Matt, so listen hard. Augustine
Listen hard.
Listen hard. Listening intensifies.
Yeah. I'm listening.
points out that in light of the fact that the sun was not created till the fourth day, what on earth do the first 3 days mean if you don't have a sun? And Augustine's point was, Genesis is not seeking to answer the question.
He might not be talking about that. He might be talking about, like I said, the formation of accretion disks to make the world happened after the stars because it needs the gravity of... For the planets to form, it needs the gravity of the sun. They can't form without the gravity of the sun. That's how accretion disks work. You
got to give matter a direction to fall so it can fall.
Yep.
Answer the question, precisely how long did God take to create?
I didn't say
agree
that.
with Augustine. I think accurate interpretation of the text.
Wow. This is almost kind of scary, you know, like Cliff, calm down, dude.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
He's like,
Holy
how dare
crap.
you question Augustine? Cliff, are you a Catholic? I am not. Why do you care what St. Augustine had to say? But okay, it is a valid... I'm not sure if criticism is the right word, but you know how Ken Ham and his crowd are always, oh, well, we know that Genesis was 24-hour days because we get, you know, evening, morning, number, day, evening, morning, number, day, however the fuck they do that chant.
Yeah.
But as Cliff just pointed out, even the great St. Augustine mentioned, there was no sun until day 4. So how would we measure morning and evening on the other 3 days?
No idea. No idea.
You know, God woke up, God went to sleep, God smoked a cigarette, whatever. Yeah. And, you know, Adam and Eve weren't around yet to mark it on their calendars, so who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Of the text.
Okay. When you tell me to listen carefully, it'd be really good if you did too. I didn't ask anything about how long it took. I asked about the order that it took.
The order, the length are not precisely given.
Okay. So basically you're saying that the order of
the order is precisely given, actually.
In
the order is
contradictory
very
ways.
In two ways that are contradictory in two different chapters. But that aside, it's still very specific about what was created on day 1, what was created on day 2, day 3, day 4. So don't gaslight us with this. Well, the order wasn't specific. Yes, it was, and it's out of order according to science. That's what he's asking you.
I wonder if Cliff also doesn't understand what the word specific means.
Maybe.
we should have done this definition thing before the debate.
Right. We needed a definition debate. And infinitesimal. Maybe he doesn't understand what that means either, because infinitesimal, like,
No bigger
Order of
than
events
an
in Genesis
infant.
1
no bigger than
not only does not match the order of events as we actually understand it from science, but doesn't match the order of events that God did create the
No,
events.
I'm not saying that, Matt. What I am saying is Genesis does not answer the question. Genesis does not address the scientific question. There is no science in Genesis. Are we clear now, Matt?
Well, there are claims about reality in Genesis, are there not?
Yes, about God, about human beings, about the value of human beings.
About God
There are
creating?
absolutely no scientific claims. Just think about who wrote Genesis. Moses.
I appreciate the fact that you'd like further.
People sitting in their tents on the corner of the promised land.
Wow, he's just gish galloping onwards, isn't he?
Mhm.
Like you're obviously talking about the order of events for creation. Look at this. Like every time I pause it. We're
Screenshot.
obviously talking about the order of events, and you're going on to the tents in the desert kind of thing. Like, could you be any more obvious about wanting to move past this subject? Like,
Promised land. Do you honestly think Moses was concerned with a question? Gosh, what's the scientific process that God used to create? It was the furthest thing from his mind. They were scared out of their wits about going to the promised land.
This is a wonderful tap dance, but this is a wonderful tap dance, but Genesis 1.
Interpretation.
No, sir, it's a wonderful tap dance because you're avoiding the question, you're avoiding the actual events, and you're going off to talk about other things elsewhere.
No, I'm
My
not.
question is, yes, you were. You literally just did. Rewind, everybody can hear it. You are not talking about Genesis
Hold
chapter
on one
1, sir. I'm asking you about Genesis chapter 1, and you're going off to talk about other things in Genesis. In Genesis chapter 1, when it gives the order of events, you're saying that order of events is not the way that God did.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I never said
Are
that.
you saying?
Let me say it again, then, Matt. So just so you get
Are you
it clear.
saying?
In Genesis
Are you
chapter
saying?
1, there is
Are you
no
saying? Oh my
scientific
God! It's
description.
so. Why is it?
Just to,
Why is it?
let's
This is
1 second.
absolutely frustrating.
Well,
Yes,
let's
are
get
you
over
saying-
that. Let's get
very well, Matt.
Are you
Wait,
saying? Are you saying that the order of events is correct?
No, I'm saying they
So
don't.
you're not. So you're not saying.
so he's not saying it's incorrect. So he's saying he doesn't know the order of events.
I mean, I
Wow.
don't know is my favorite answer because then
Yeah.
we get to go learn.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, this Cliff. Whew.
I don't care about the order of events.
I don't care what you care about. I'm saying you seem to be saying.
author is not
You seem to be
concerned about the order of
saying.
events.
You seem to be saying that the order of events is not correct. You're not saying that it's not
Not
correct.
addressed by
Hang on.
text.
Let me finish. You're not saying that it's not correct, and you're not saying that it is correct.
I am saying, and I'll say it again for the umpteenth time, Genesis chapter 1 is not giving us a scientific description of how God created.
That's not the same as the order being correct or incorrect. Like you're saying this book is true. It is true what it says, and you're saying that it agrees and it has infinitesimal details. It's all consistent, so it is true. And now you're saying, well, I don't know if that's the truth. It's
Okay.
weird.
I mean, well, I've also heard a number of modern super progressive Christians. You know how when this came up on Ger's stream last night, how Protestants broke away from the Catholics by saying, you know what, we don't need a pope. All we need is the book. Well,
Sure,
now
yeah.
there's even more progressive Christians running around saying, you know what, we don't even need the damn book. All we need is the general concept of
Right.
be nice to other humans, don't be a dick, and, you know, Jesus is the super hippie in the sky, whatever. Like,
I'm kind of on
I
board
can
with that, to be honest with you. Like, because if
Yeah.
you just dump the book, you've gotten rid of so much horrible stuff to begin with, you know.
yeah, I mean, if people adopted don't be a dick as the central tenet of their religion, I think, you know, many of us are atheists, but I dare say the majority of us skeptics are humanists first.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a good humanist, I don't care what you believe in, you know?
Right.
Just don't be a
Yep.
dick.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've said in the past, especially during this Pride Week. If you want to support trans people and gay people, do I care why you're doing it? I don't care. That you're doing it is enough. That's fine. Do I agree with everything you think? No. But if you're being a good person or a decent person or a moral person, I do not care why you're doing it. The important thing is the actions, not the reasons why. You know, and
Well,
some people give do charity and food because it makes them feel like a great person and superior. Do I care? I do not.
Yeah.
People are being helped. That's the only thing that's important there.
The people in our chat are causing mischief again.
Of course they are. I mean, I take that as whatever they say. They're always causing mischief.
Yeah. That's the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter.
I didn't say it was.
Answering the question.
I haven't said anything remotely like that.
With Genesis
I
1.
haven't said anything
Answering the question,
remotely
what
like that.
process did God use?
I didn't ask about a process. I didn't ask about any of that. The fact that you have dishonestly refused to address your own contradiction here is very telling. All I asked about was the order of events and whether or not you were convinced that the order accurately reflected the order, not the process, not how, the order that things happen, or not. And you would not say
order
that
is process. For me, order is part of the process.
I'm sorry that order is process for you, but that's not process. I didn't ask
how.
how. I asked about order. I don't know why this is so difficult. I do know why. Because fundamentally, you know that this order doesn't match reality, and you have no explanation for why the almighty God of the universe conveyed information about an order that does not match the facts of the universe.
And you have a wrong interpretation of Genesis 1, and you're using science to contradict a wrong interpretation of Genesis 1, and that is very sad, Matt.
You know what's sad? That you accuse me of...
You're using science, you infidel.
Yeah. So you've got the wrong interpretation. So how do you interpret that? Like, oh God, every time I pause, it's like a man descending into madness. Look, if he's got the wrong interpretation, explain how you get from day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and then rest. Explain how you get to the right interpretation. Explain that to us. Because it seems really clear, like just insanely clear, right? What do you think?
I was kind of thinking, the words don't want to come out, which is why I didn't pipe up, because the thoughts there.
Oh, well, I don't want to force you
the
to say
words
anything,
aren't.
you don't understand.
It just. I feel like there's a way to translate this, like Cliff, in language that the rest of us would understand. Is Cliff is trying to say Matt's strawmanning him by using science against an incorrect interpretation. Mm-hmm. But that's not the real question. Like whether it's a straw man or it's the real version, show us how it can be verified and real. Like, that's the thing. Straw man, steel man, take your pick. Work with something instead of just whining about it.
Accuse me of having a wrong interpretation when I'm the only one that's willing to read it and talk about what it actually says.
I read all
that is sad. You are the sad one to suggest that this is a problem of my interpretation when I'm literally asking you for your view.
I told you.
This is the best tap dance ever played. Good job on that.
Does not answer the question.
That's out fucking standing.
Clean up language, Matt.
I don't need to clean up my language at all, sir. You need to clean up your thinking.
No, you need to straighten out your thinking and think more logically.
You and your damn science, and now you have to be more logical. Matt, don't you realize you should be logical in these debates? Don't get all emotional. We could do a highlight reel of this shit. It's fantastic.
Know, right?
Fantasy puts into illogic.
Thank you.
This might be a good opportunity to go into the Q&A. We do have a lot of questions. We're going to move through these fast. Couple of things. Housekeeping.
Okay, so that's going into Q&A. That's basically where it ends. So we'll probably call it there. But yeah, that ending on there is just it's beautiful. It's Cliff saying,
I want a poster.
Well, it's just funny the way he's like, well, interpretations and the way you take it and the way you interpret. Be more logical. You know, logic isn't a matter of interpretation, Cliff. You know that, right? That logical is supposed to be like not be able to be interpreted. It's not subjective.
Yeah, there's no fucking ending the debate on refusing to logic the whole time, conceding that your logical methodology is critically flawed, and then telling the other guy You need to be more logical.
Yeah. And
For fuck's
the
sake.
massive logical step of demanding a methodology to prove you wrong, demanding that you give me the methodology to prove that you're wrong is just Cliff. You're a treasure. You're a national treasure. I gotta say.
Maybe that's why these debates happen, so that people who enjoy digging in like this, it's endless entertainment.
Oh yeah. He really did not do well in this. And so as we come to the end of that debate section, the discussions, I mean, the Q&A is a different story, but the debate section, we have to say, well, what evidence did we get for is Christianity true? Like, really, what evidence did we get? What was the total sum of evidence that we were given? Really, it was the Bible, just the Bible.
Well, Cliff said that it's true. It feels true. It has the ring of truth.
It does have the ring of truth,
and the places. Some of the places exist.
They do. Yes,
Yeah.
I will admit that they do. Yes, and I think he mentioned extra biblical sources briefly. Okay, he sort of misrepresented what those extra biblical sources said, because he said that they were eyewitnesses at one point. They weren't. Things like that. But yeah, that's about the only evidence that we heard from it. If you leave aside the incredible subjective stuff like it rings true, and morality exists. I can't even think of whatever else he said, to be honest with you. That's about it. He had very little. It was mostly just Bible. That's it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the infinitesimal inaccuracies between the four Gospels, which were totally written by eyewitnesses.
And they were written by the people that they claim to be written by, even though the church does put a page on it saying, hey, this was according to tradition from the early church fathers. Ignore all of that and just believe that they were written by these people.
Yeah.
Wow.
It just it's
like I said, his son does better.
Yeah.
His son definitely does better. He's definitely the better debater. But I mean, Cliff at his heart is just a fiery, gets angry on the street corner street preacher. That's what he is at heart. He is not a go into philosophical rooms and start to talk logic with people. He's not let's really challenge my beliefs and find out if they're true. He is at heart a street preacher, and I think that showed during this debate.
Yep.
Do you have any final thoughts, any final comments before I start to wrap up?
Not really. We covered pretty much everything. I mean, I just the shit that comes out of his mouth, like, he's clearly reacting without thinking.
Yeah.
He had me in fits for a couple points there. It was just I can't believe some of the shit he said. So that's part of what makes these fun to watch. I mean, getting into the nitty gritty of the arguments that's great. But when one of those special moments happens, it's the best.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Ember, do tell me what you got coming up. What you doing?
Well, like I said earlier, tomorrow I'm over on Aaron's channel for Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith reading the Book of Mormon. That's at 6, and then immediately after, Aaron and I are both coming to my channel for this week's Atheist Live. Monday,
beautiful.
think we're joining Dr. Dino for Creationist Theater, but I'm not 100% on that. Honestly, because I can't keep up with the messages in Dr. Dino's Discord. There's so many. But we have been for the last few weeks, so we probably will.
Okay, so that's partially my fault, because I did start up this gaming thing. So a lot of it is just sort of, gaming stuff, and then what we're organizing kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't mix personal and work, but
Yeah. It keeps things interesting anyway. And Beamsy's always posting way off topic stuff anyway.
Of course, yeah, that's Beamsy for you. I mean,
but-
you love it. You gotta love it. But yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Beamsy's a fun person. But
Absolutely.
so probably Dr. Dino's on Monday evening. Well, evening for me, it'd be Tuesday morning for you because you're in the future.
Yeah.
And then Wednesday, I've got a regular video immediately before Aaron's Blasphemer's Bible, and then Saturday a regular video. And I may do. I've got a new live stream program that I want to try out that I may do this week, because since Atheist Lives became an interview show, I don't really have an open room show anymore. And I know those don't get great views, but the people who come and play and participate, they make them fun. So I kind of want to have one. So it'd be like a random drifting show that may show up like Gers. You may get like half an hour warning or something. But I think what the hell did I
I'm
title
going to
it?
have to invade it if it happens. I'm.
Oh yeah. If the timing works out, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a title for it, but I can't think of it off the top of my head because my brain is completely out of juice for today. Cliff depleted it all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cliff can do that to you, yeah.
So yeah, normal videos Wednesday and Saturday. Live stuff on other people's things, and maybe some surprise live stuff. Could be cool.
Nice. Well, I've got some stuff coming up. I've got the interview with Sunflower coming up is going to be amazing. I really am looking forward to talking with Sunflower in a very casual way. On Wednesday, I've replaced the aimbot because of Reddit sort of closing down almost with Arc over on my other channel. So I've got all on that's Tuesday, my Wednesday. And the interview with Sunflower is Monday Eastern time, Monday night Eastern time. And then I've got a guy called Christian Pike that I'm interviewing. I have to put a clip event up for it, but I'll be interviewing him and just talking about evolution and Christianity and all that kind of stuff. I think he's an old Earth creationist, so not it's not going to be somebody that's sort of Hovind or Raw Mat X. But then I do have that on Friday night. I'm debating Raw Mat, who I'd never heard of before, and so that's going to be interesting, and that's on evolution, which I think would probably be one of my strong parts. I think I've done, because biology I used to be really bad on, but I've done a lot of work on it, trying to sort of understand stuff. So I understand a lot more about biology now, which I'm really happy about. I'm very, very happy about, and I think that is something that will be just amazing. So that's going to be a really good debate, and that's over on Standing for Truth, which I can't complain. He does give me a lot of debates, so thanks to them. But obviously their positions, I agree with Grayson, they are silly. That's why the guy left. He called his position silly, and he was like, "Oh, you're ad homing," and he's like, saying that your belief is silly is not an ad hom. Grayson's right. That's not an ad hom.
Yeah, it's not attacking you. It's attacking the belief.
Right. It cannot be an ad hom. Like, yeah, okay, it's not a good argument, just saying, but that's not. He sort of said why it was silly. He didn't just say, "Hey, it's silly," and left it there. It's not an ad hom. I don't know. I kind of suspect that he didn't have an answer for what he said, so he just sort of took his bat and ball and went home. Is what I think anyway. But that's just what I suspect, kind of stuff. So yeah, that's fantastic. So I have to update my members. Thank you so much to all my members and all the people that subscribed. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Victoria, you're right. He's mad that Grayson was prepared. He was so prepared as well. And he was not happy about it. Thank you so much for coming, Amber. It is always a pleasure. I really enjoy doing this. So next time your channel, you get to pick our poison. You know,
Yeah,
it'll
probably be a flavor of Hitchens.
Okay, fantastic. Hey,
Yeah, classic.
I'm always on board for a hitch slap. Always on board. I just every time I paused it, this thing, it was just it was hilarious to see the expression on that dude's face. So yeah, very, very funny. Very funny. But thank you so much for coming, and thank you everybody. If you could be so very, very kind, do leave a like and subscribe if you are not already. I've got to update my members list, but I will flash it quickly what I've got. But I've got a couple of names to put on it, so that will be coming. I just have to update it. So my apologies for that. I'll do it right away after this. But thanks, Ember, and don't forget to be kind to each other and to yourself. Do take care, everybody, and have a great day, night, wherever you are.
Yeah, as Kata would say, stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated, yes, as Kata would say, and Kata knows best.